post to your profile.
Hold on, I'm coming. Hold on.
E-share via email. Report story. Chapter 3 Reunion. By all accounts, Ochako should have assumed they were under attack. Mara had barely opened the door 2 inches before someone charged right into the room, almost bulldozing over the skinny man. Not even the mighty death arms seemed to be strong or fast enough to keep the trespasser at bay. Ochako, who thought of herself as a hero in training with above-average reflexes, couldn't even stand up before a short figure was already throwing itself at Izuku. Her protective instincts kicked in, and she was ready to put her quirk and the gunhead martial arts she knew to good use, throwing whoever dared attack Izuku under her watch out the window and into the stratosphere. She'd let them float aimlessly up there for 10 minutes and then, if she bothered to remember, she'd release her quirk. Her inner toga kept coming up with more ways of protecting Izuku, but she noticed two things in the millisecond that she had to process what her eyes saw. 1. Whoever entered the room was crying a river. And 2. They had dark green hair. Her moment of hesitation was enough for the woman to reach Izuku, seemingly throwing herself right into his arms, though Ochako could tell that she made sure of not pressing herself onto him too hard. It was a much more gentle and careful embrace than the ones Ochako had been giving him since she caught him in the air, and that realization made her feel a bit guilty. She obviously hadn't been trying to hurt Izuku or cause him any pain, that went without saying, but looking at this woman's careful touch made her realize that she might have gotten a bit carried away, indulging in her selfish desire to feel his body next to hers. To make sure he was alive, that it was real and not yet another one of those fleeting dreams where he came back. Whoever this person was, Ochako could tell that she loved Izuku enough to still be worried about not adding to his pain, no matter how much she wanted to hold him close. And that, combined with the beautiful shade of green in her hair, was enough for her to put two and two together. My boy, the woman wailed, her eyes becoming two waterfalls that, given enough time, could have flooded the entire room. Any doubts Ochako may have still had about the identity of the woman were dispelled right then. She'd recognized that way of crying anywhere. Mom. The way Izuku's face lit up was priceless. The shock from the unexpected intrusion turned into the happiest of smiles, as he closed his eyes and pushed past the pain and tiredness to hug his mother. He was already emotional with everything going on, and when he surrendered himself to his mother's embrace, he couldn't help but cry as well. Ochako felt like crying, too. She'd seen Izuku at his best and also his worst. She thought she'd seen almost all aspects of him, but right then she realized that she had never seen him like this. It was easy to forget his actual age when more often than not he was fighting unbelievably strong and dangerous villains, throwing himself headfirst into the fray, breaking his bones like it was the most normal thing in the world. But he was still a 16-years-old boy. And it had never been clearer for Ochako than right then, seeing him cry as he hugged his mom like there was no tomorrow. She had been upset at him for leaving them all behind, but it dawned on her that there was no way Deku, someone who cared so much about his friends and loved ones, would have been fine all by himself, running away from everyone. The dullness in his eyes. He'd been in pain, she could tell. She doubled down on her promise to make him feel better. To protect him. Maybe she wouldn't be able to protect him from exchanging blows with supervillains, though she was gonna still try her damn hardest anyway, but at least she'd save him from loneliness and feeling lost. Promoted stories. You'll also like. Not all heroes wear capes. Some just have A.43.3K 1.4 kilo. Everybody. This is a suicidal, depressed Deku book with Dadmic. Will their bond grow? Will Mike fuck up? Will Izuku try to kill himself? Find out yourself. Number 1 Radio. Mirko X Shy Male Reader 177K 1.1 Key. Don't own MHA. I hope you enjoy the story I made. Convicted Hearts 4110 like my other story but ILI longer. Hurt cuz I love you to death Izuocha. Ha. Point 9.1K 141 Class 1A is now Class 2A and is working to be better heroes due to events that had happened before. Deku has gotten strong feelings toward Uraraka during the summer as Izuku's Harem Academia 194K 1.8 Qst. Read. I am. Sequel of. You are check mark 69.5K 1.8K. This book is the sequel of. You are so better read that first before going here. Tears of joy, tears of joy. Thank you to that one reader that suggested this title. I can't see you sad face but thank you. The hero who sings with a smile 40.1K 372 high. Guys, this is my first story I write on Wattpad. I hope you like it. Something moved to her left, and she turned to see all sorts of small objects beginning to float around the room. Pens, pieces of paper, unplugged cords, medical instruments. Every tiny thing that wasn't fixed to the floor or a wall began to slowly move towards Izuku and his mom. Ochako was perplexed. Was it maybe Mrs. Midoriya's quirk? Best Jeanist moved a finger, and strings of cloth jumped from his jacket, catching every object and gently placed them back where they were. He, Hawks, and Gran Torino exchanged a quick look. He finally took a step forward and cleared his throat. Izuku and his mom broke the hug to look at the pro heroes. I'm sure the two of you have much to talk about. We'll leave for now, but feel free to call us should you need anything, Best Jeanist said, leaving a card on the nightstand next to Izuku's bed. I'll be talking with the representatives of the Hero Public Safety Commission to sort out how to continue from here. I'll go talk with the press, said Hawks, looking resigned. I'm sure they want to hear the current number one talking about what happened. I'll keep them busy so they don't bother you. I'll be meeting with Principal Nezu, added Gran Torino. UA's staff is taking direct responsibility in securing the hospital and watching over its students' recovery, and they need all the help they can get. The three made a move to leave the room, but Izuku's mom stood up and put herself between them and the exit. The pro heroes didn't flinch, but Ochako could feel the tension rising in the room. The woman kept crying, clutching her chest like she was afraid her heart would pop out of it. Her arms and legs shook with evident fear, but her resolved expression would have intimidated the scariest of villains. Ochako turned to look at Izuku, and she could see in his pale face that he dreaded whatever was going to happen next. She gulped and turned to look at the adults. I know you were working with All Might while my Izuku was off on his own fighting dangerous villains, the woman said, her words very measured as she tried to keep her worries aside. He risked his life for weeks, away from everyone. He had to leave his school, his friends, his home, had to deal with something no child should ever have to deal with. Mom, Izuku began, though he wasn't sure of what he could say. Ochako bit her lip. She'd heard Gran Torino's reasoning and Izuku's logic as to why he did things the way he did. Even then, she still had some gripes with him, and she certainly didn't appreciate the pro heroes letting him do all that by himself. If that angered her, She couldn't even begin to imagine how his mother was feeling. If Mrs. Midoriya ended up throwing hands with the top two heroes, Ochako decided she would be cheering for her. You let him go out by himself, fighting the League of Villains and all those fugitives. He was doing the job you were supposed to do you. We all saw it on TV, you only showed up when he got the leader of the league out of his hiding spot. You used him as bait. To get the villains to come out of their hiding. It was obvious that Hawks and Genist had nothing to say in their defense. Ochako could tell that they weren't particularly proud of their behavior. They didn't look defiant nor did they try to justify their actions. They looked exactly like they had a couple of months ago with Endeavor when they took full responsibility in front of the press for everything that had gone wrong in the battle against Shigaraki and the Paranormal Liberation Front. They wore resigned looks on their faces and the heavy shadow of guilt in their eyes. Ochako could tell that they were going to stand there and take whatever slings and arrows Mrs. Midoriya decided to throw their way. Izuku looked away, clenching his fists, and his eyes met Ochako's. She kept her silence but tried her best to soften her expression. She was at a point where she wasn't sure she had any words left for the day. Seeing my boy risking his life, watching him fight on national TV, I had never been more terrified in my life, his mother continued. He's so young. He may be strong, but he's still my little Izuku. You are the top two heroes. We should be counting on you. You shouldn't have to count on him. As a mother, I'm not sure I can ever forgive you for putting my son through so much. Genist's eyes darted to the side, and Hawks took a deep breath, though his expression remained neutral. I want nothing but the best for Izuku. His safety, his happiness. But I also want him to chase his dreams, she said, her voice dropping and her trembling legs trying their best to keep her from falling to her knees. Being a hero is all he's ever dreamed of, and that's a path I can't help him with. So even though it worries and it pains me to see him risking his life, even though you two let him put himself at risk, you can help him with his dream more than I ever could. I know it's selfish of me to ask this from two professional heroes. But All Might promised me that he'd stay alive to teach him and make sure he grew up to be a great hero, and now he's gone. I want to support Izuku and watch him become the hero I know he can be, but I need to know that he won't be alone. I know you have so much on your plate, but my Izuku risked everything to save everyone, and he's all I've got. I still believe in heroes. I believe in you too. But as a citizen and a mother, I have to ask you to make sure my boy won't be on his own like that ever again. Best Genist took a step forward and readied his answer. He won't. Only to stay silent as he, along with everyone else in the room, turned to look at Ochako. Her pink cheeks turned red, especially with Mama Midoriya's eyes set on her. She didn't mean to interrupt a conversation she wasn't a part of, she really didn't. She knew Izuku's mom wasn't talking to her. She wanted real reassurance from real heroes, not some teenage girl jumping the gun and speaking out loud without realizing it. Her heart had spoken without asking her mind for permission. Hearing Izuku's mother speaking about her worries and what she wanted for Izuku, Ochako had felt a strong sense of kinship. She could relate to those feelings, she knew them too well. It was the same thing she wanted. In different ways, they both loved the boy with freckled cheeks. They both wanted him to succeed. They both saw him for who he was, a true hero at heart. They were both worried about his safety and the fact that he was stubborn and heroic enough to try to do everything by himself just so others wouldn't have to worry and get in trouble for him. Ochako knew exactly what they were both going through, and she was determined to become the solution to their problems. To be the hero Izuku needed, even if he didn't realize it. She kept thinking all of these things but soon realized that no one in the room could read her mind, and they were all looking at her expectantly. She shook her head to clear her thoughts and focus, standing up and crossing both hands over her chest. All eyes were on her, but she wouldn't let the embarrassment win her over. Deku won't be alone, she said, and she surprised even herself with how determined she sounded. He has friends that care deeply for him. The rest of our class, we were all so worried about him. He'll never admit it, but we all look up to him like a leader. He inspires all of us to become better heroes, better people, and I know that every one of us will do our best to keep him safe. I know I will. He's my best friend, and I want to make sure I'm there for him from now on. I know I'm not a pro hero, but I can promise you that I'll do my best to be there for your son. She gently bowed, though she mostly did it to let her bangs fall and hide her blushing face. She tried really hard to come off as a worried friend, but it was hard to measure her words to make sure she didn't give out just how much she truly cared for Izuku, and how much deeper her feelings for him were. She was also aware of the fact that her first interaction ever with her best friend's mother was her interrupting a conversation between adults to promise to protect and be there for her son. She hadn't even introduced herself properly. Should she just excuse herself and leave the room? Should she apologize? She tried to calm herself. It wasn't a big deal, right? She was just trying to show support for her best friend. His mother was understandably upset, and she was reassuring her that she had every intention of keeping Izuku safe, or at the very least, to be there with him whenever he had to risk himself. It was fine. She was fine. Everything was going to be okay. You're Ochako, right? Oh, God, everything was so not okay. She knew her name. How did she recognize her? Obviously, she'd heard of her from Izuku, but how much did she know? Just that they were classmates. Why would she assume that she was Ochako and not Momo or Sue? What in the world did Izuku say about her? How much did he talk about her with his mom? Why, yes, ma'am. The woman's face softened, and she seemed to be about to say something to her, but Hawks rushed in. Mrs. Midoriya, as you can see, your son is in good company, he said, and Ochako saw him giving Izuku a weird smirk like there was an inside joke or something he knew that he wasn't sharing with anyone else. He has some great friends. And I know for a fact that his classmates are shaping up to become better heroes than most would expect. Even then, you are absolutely right, Best Jeanist chipped in. As talented as they are, they're still children. We know our actions have caused you grief and, as pro-heroes, that's something we're deeply ashamed of. All I can say is that everyone in this room, he said, and his eyes rested on Ochako for a second, will do our best to help your son become a great hero. Gran Torino sighed and shook his head with a smile on his face, the wrinkles around his eyes visible even under his mask. No, Genist, he said in his wise old man voice. The hero he's already turned into. You've raised a fantastic boy, miss. He's gone far and beyond all of our expectations. He may be a young, stubborn child, but he's already a hero in his own right. Our job isn't to get him to become a hero, but to make sure he stays on this path for as long as he wishes to. Both Midoriyas began to cry waterfalls, and if it wasn't for the fact that the veteran hero's words were so kind and true, Ochako would have allowed herself to giggle at the sight of the two green-haired fountains. She'd always found Izuku's sensitive nature adorable, and seeing that he'd gotten it from his mom made it even cuter. We offer our apologies, and should any of you ever need anything, you can call us or our agencies and we'll offer as much help as we can, added Best Jeanist, but neither mother nor son was in any condition to reply. We won't bother you any longer for today. Rest well, Midoriya. You've earned it. The pro-heroes left the room, bowing their heads at Izuku, his mom, and Ochako, who realized that was probably her cue to leave as well. She didn't want to if she could have it her way. She'd get a chair to stay next to Izuku until he left the hospital. But she hadn't considered that his mom would obviously want to be with him after so many weeks and with all the crazy dangerous things he'd gone through. I should get going, too, she said, holding the bandages on her left hand. She took a tentative step towards the exit, but then both Midoriyas turned in her direction. Wait, they both said, before looking at each other in surprise. Ochako drew a sharp breath and had to actively stop herself from squealing. Why you go first, Mom? Izuku's mother rubbed her hands against her eyes, sweeping away the lingering tears, and then proceeded to step right in front of Ochako, giving her the sweetest of smiles. My name is Inko Midoriya, honey. I can't believe I'm finally meeting you, she said, her voice cracking with the heavy emotions she was going through. I've heard so much about you. Izuku's face turned beet red, and if the heat in her cheeks was any indicator, so did Ochako's. Mom. I was so happy to learn that Izuku made friends so quickly at UA. And the way he always talked about you. I've wanted to meet you for the longest time. I, the pleasure's all mine, ma'am, she said, trying to stay calm and control her shaking arms. I remember watching you at the sports festival last year. You were so fierce. And today, I saw you flying to catch my Izuku. Inko's eyes narrowed and looked ready to spew out more tears. I saw how you caught him, and how you helped him stand up and you helped him raise his fist, and brought him here. A and J just now YY you just said you W want to be there for him. It means so much to me. Inko began to rub her hands together. Her body language told Ochako that she was ready to hug her, but for some reason kept holding back. Maybe she was afraid of hurting her. Because of all the blood, cuts, and bruises on her body. Or was she afraid of coming off as too abrasive? In Ochako's mind, the fact that this was the first time they ever spoke to each other meant nothing. There was a certain boy they both cared deeply for, and that was enough to make Ochako feel like they were on the same page. And so, feeling confident, she grabbed Inko's hands and held them tight, giving her a gentle smile. Deku's my best friend, Mrs. Midoriya. He's a great hero and an even greater person, and I know he'll always have my back. I'm just doing the same for him, she casually explained, though her eyes then moved to meet Izuku's grateful gaze. He wants to protect everyone, and he's strong enough to do it, but he's still a person, and sometimes things can be too much even for him. So I want to be the one that helps him help everyone else. If that makes any sense. It does, Izuku said with a conflicted look that betrayed his radiant smile. It really does. So much has happened, and I'm still trying to make sense of everything. It's surreal. His gaze lost itself in the air, staring at nothing until he suddenly shook his head and forced a bigger smile. What I'm trying to say is, thank you, Uraraka. You probably don't even realize how much you've helped me in the time we've known each other. Starting on the day we met. You didn't even know who I was, and you still helped me. Says the guy that saved me from a giant robot that was worth 0 points, she retorted. Izuku probably didn't realize it, but the fakeness of his previous smile became even more evident now that a genuine one took its place. You helped me first, he pointed out, engaging in playful banter. And when I broke half my body, you saved me from falling. Just like you did today. But this time you didn't have to break your bones to beat someone. We're making progress, she said, and they both shared a giggle. A giggle that was interrupted by Izuku having a coughing fit that, judging by his pained expression, hurt his ribs. So, I should get my hand checked out. And I know you two need some time to talk and catch up, so. I guess I'll leave for now, but I'll come back to check tomorrow, alright? If they let me. I'll make them let you, he said with a smile. Thanks, Uraraka. Thank you so much, sweetie. Please, go get taken care of, Inko said, gently bowing. And please, call your parents to let them know you're okay. I'm sure they must be worried sick. With everything going on, Ochako hadn't considered that idea. It was still the middle of the afternoon, so her parents must have been at work, but with all the cameras that were there at UA, family and friends had most likely seen what was going on, and they must have let them know. Her parents were probably desperately calling her, but the siege started in the middle of their heroic class, so she didn't have her phone with her. It was still in her room, assuming it hadn't been destroyed during the attack. She grimaced. She wasn't in a position to afford a new phone. I will. Thank you. And Deku. She took a second to breathe in and keep her emotions in check. Yeah, he asked, slightly tilting his head. Ochako stared at his tired face. He looked inexplicably older, but she could still see the cheerful, excited boy she knew. His round cheeks, his adorable freckles, his deep green eyes. I'm so happy to have you back with us, she finally said, and then turned around and walked out of the room before the desire to hug him one more time got the better of her. At some point, it would start to get weird and too obvious. He needed time to rest, to recover, and to deal with all these new changes he was being forced into. He didn't need the stress and distraction of her feelings for him added to his baggage. Soon, though, she told herself. Soon, once the dust had settled and the time was right, she'd make a move. She'd stop running away from her feelings and would instead actively fight for them. She closed the door behind her and found herself in a very crowded hallway. Death Arms was standing near the door to Izuku's room, talking with Mera and Chief Suragame. Several armed guards were stationed at the corners of the hall and next to the windows. A couple of doctors walked past, looking scared by all the guns and security. She was about to ask one of them if they were able to treat her, but Mera from the Hero Public Safety Commission spotted her. Ah, yes, he said, stopping one of the doctors with a hand gesture. This girl is a student from UA. Please take her with the rest of her class and make sure she receives the treatment she needs. Let Dr. Toriyama know where she is so he can communicate it to the UA staff. Yes, sir, the doctor said, turning to face Ochako. Please, follow me. Thank you, she told Mera, who nodded politely. She was about to leave, but Death Arms cleared his throat. Excuse me, kid, but are you from Class 2A? He asked. Yeah, I am. Do you know if Jiro is alright? She frowned in confusion. The hulking hero, with arms that were almost as big and wide as her entire body, showed some deep worry in his face, and the gentle, polite way that he asked seemed to contrast with his tough, imposing look. Like watching a great white shark at a tea party. But then she remembered that Kyoka had interned with him, and his worry made a lot more sense. She tried to think back. When All for One and the League of Villains showed up at the front gates of the school, the teachers had sent all the students to the barracks where civilians and refugees lived. They were tasked to evacuate them as fast as possible while the pro-heroes tried to keep the villains at bay soon enough. However, Dobby and many others had managed to sneak past, and that's when Iida stepped up and led them and Class 2B to join the fray. Ochako, Su, Denki, and Tetsu went one way, and the rest split up into different groups. She vaguely remembered Kyoka running with Rikido and Setsuna. She hadn't seen her during the rest of the battle, but she could swear she was there with everyone else when they ran to celebrate Izuku's triumphal return. She hadn't properly examined her friend, so she wouldn't be able to say that Kyoka was fine, but she didn't seem to be in any critical condition. She made it out alive, she said. I haven't talked with her, but she seemed to be holding up well, all things considered. Death Arms let out a sigh and crossed his massive arms over his chest. I see. That's good to hear. She's a tough one. She is. Thanks. And great job, kid. You all acted like real heroes today. Go get better. We need more people like you, he said, before turning back to continue a conversation with his superiors. Come with me, miss, the doctor said, snapping Ochako out of a little trance. A pro-hero had just congratulated her. She didn't hold Death Arms in any particularly high regard, but he'd just moved significantly up in her personal billboard. His words hit her hard. Real heroes. They needed more people like her. As the doctor asked her questions to get a sense of her state and led her to a room, she felt like she was floating, but not because of her quirk. She'd truly acted like a hero. She'd protected civilians. She'd single-handedly defeated Toga in combat, knocking her out and incapacitating her for pro-heroes and the police to capture her. She caught Deku and helped him get on his feet to introduce himself to the eyes of the world. She didn't need a hero license. She felt proud of herself, and that was all that mattered. She was led to another wing of the hospital where the UA students were seemingly being treated. She saw a lot of students from the Management and General Studies department, and a few from the Support department. What caught her attention the most was the number of pro-heroes moving around, carrying wounded students, talking to nurses, or simply patrolling. She recognized Fourth Kind, Mr. Brave, Centipeter, and even the prestigious Wash, but the sheer number of costumed individuals walking around kept her eyes moving like crazy. That is until a voice called her name. Uraraka, come here. She would recognize that mechanical voice anywhere in the world. She turned to look at her favorite rescue hero, 13, walking towards her with her battered costume. Her helmet had some cracks, and there were many cuts on her suit, but she seemed to be fine. It still pained Ochako to see the missing arm on her teacher, but the joy to see that she had made it out alive from the battle overrode any other emotion. Professor, she said, running to her teacher. How are you doing? Are you all right? The space hero asked, examining her student. Yeah, I'm fine, really. Only my hand got a nasty wound, she said, showing her bandaged palm. Can you move your fingers? The hero asked, opening and closing her own as an example. Ochako tried it, and even though the medications didn't completely remove the pain, she was able to do it. All right, your tendons don't seem to be compromised. Still, try not to move it too much. Recovery girl is treating your friends. She'll get to you soon. Come with me. 13 told the doctor she'd handle Ochako from that point, and thus the student and teacher walked towards the other end of the wing. Uraraka, I would like to tell you in the name of UA that we are more than proud of the way you and your classmates responded to the crisis, 13 said. Thank you, she said, finding it hard to believe that her favorite hero was proud of her. We just did what any of you would have done. You did. The school continues to fail in protecting you, but every one of these crises has shown us that the future will be bright with heroes like you. We'll try our best to, Uraraka. Sorry, she said, pressing her fingers together and releasing her quirk to stop floating up towards the ceiling. I just. 13 laughed at her blushing face. It's all right. I know it's a lot to take in for now. Let's go to your room and wait for recovery girl. Focus on getting better and resting. You've earned it. Ochako sighed and tried to relax. They kept walking, passing by many rooms and students being sent to different parts of the hospital. Very few seemed to be unharmed. Almost everyone had some kind of minor injury. Cuts, burns, bruises, slashes, blood-covered clothes. A few doctors and heroes carried kids with oxygen masks and bandaged heads and torsos. Some students were crying or screaming in pain. At one point, Ochako saw a snipe running with a first-year student in his arms, and judging by all the blood and the way her pants flopped, she seemed to have lost at least a foot. She felt sick to her stomach, and 13 put her hand on her shoulder. Attacking a school, targeting children. I don't think I've ever seen a more outrageous act of villainy, the space hero said, seething. Are my friends okay? She wished her teacher would reply right away with an energetic yes, but a second and then two passed with no reply. They all made it out alive, she finally replied. Some suffered some injuries, but nothing crippling or major. The hero courses performed exceptionally well in this crisis. The rest of the departments, they didn't have your experience in the field or your training to respond to a catastrophe like this. Nothing else was said as 13 led Ochako to her room. Upon arriving, the latter was glad to see that there were other beds in there, and sitting on them with a couple of nurses checking them up were Suyu and Mina. They both showed bruises and a few cuts on their costumes but seemed to be fine otherwise. Ochako, the pink girl said, guys, I'm so glad to see you're okay. She said, running closer to her classmates. She couldn't hug them because she didn't want to bother the nurses, but they all smiled at each other. How are you doing? Sue asked. I'm fine. Don't worry. And how's Midoriya doing? He's all right, Ochako said, not realizing the smile on her face or the way her hands moved over her chest. He's being taken special care of, the public hero. No, wait, the safety commission guys. They have pro heroes next to his room. Hawks and Best Jeanist were there, too. Mina and Suyu exchanged a look, though Ochako could see that Mina had an impish smile. Well, he did kind of save the world, Ribbit. All of you did a wonderful job. Girls, 13 intervened. You all acted like real heroes and fought dangerous villains. Don't sell yourself short. I'm not saying we didn't do our part, Suyu said. We all know what we did and how much we helped. I'm just saying Midoriya came just in time to save us, and he defeated all for one. If there were any remaining villains out there, he would be their top target right now, so it makes sense for him to be protected. Though it's a shame he doesn't have his number one bodyguard, Mina theatrically said, striking a dramatic pose with the back of her right hand pressing against her forehead. Huh, I'm talking about you, girl. The horned teen pointed a finger at Ochako, her evil smile stronger than ever. We all saw you jumping in the air to catch him. And the way you helped him stand up. Ah, so romantic. I was waiting for a kiss in front of the cameras. Minna. This time, Ochako was mindful enough to keep her pinkies away from her face as she covered it with her hands. The last thing she wanted was to float away, adding to her already astronomical embarrassment. The fact that she could hear 13 giggling behind her only added to her shame. I was happy to see you and him together after so long, though, Suyu added, thanking the nurse that finished stitching a knife slash on her forearm. I hadn't seen you smiling like that ever since he left. Ochako peeked through her fingers. This wasn't the first time her friends brought up how sad she looked during the past few weeks. The girls had tried multiple times to cheer her up, but the general mood of the class had dropped since one of them didn't return for their second year. Well, yeah, it was also great to see Midoriya back. And oh boy did he put up a good show. I don't think I've ever seen anything like it, maybe when All Might fought at the USJ. He does seem to have developed new quirks, Sue mentioned, examining her forearm. I saw him creating a smokescreen. Your boyfriend has a lot of quirks, Chaco. Stop it, Fiend, Mina said, and she softened her smile. But seriously, do you know if he's coming back to UA now that All for One's gone? He will, right? Well, he sure wants to. She then turned to look at 13. I haven't talked with Principal Nezu, but I would guess that UA will be more than happy to have a student back. We gotta have a welcome back party. A super returnapalooza. Lots of junk food and good music. It's gonna be awesome. While I'm glad to see that you're healthy and in a good enough mood to plan celebrations, I think for now you should all focus on resting and getting better, 13 suggested. And I don't mean to intrude in your personal relationships, but if I may, I have a piece of advice regarding Izuku Midoriya. Sue and Mina sat straighter, the smiles leaving their faces, and Ochako turned to look at her teacher with concerned eyes. You probably know more about the details of everything that's been going on with your friend than me, but I do know that today will have consequences. The status quo will change drastically and urgently, and your friend will be in the spotlight. His battle was broadcasted to the entire nation, and whether he wants it or not, he'll be reaching levels of popularity and relevance that he's never dreamed of. Becoming a public figure isn't easy. It's something we pro heroes struggle with every day, and he'll have to face it at a rate and level that I don't think anyone else ever has. It's not gonna be easy. It's going to be one of his hardest struggles to date, and he's gonna need all of you to keep him grounded. It was impossible to see her face through the dark glass of her helmet, but her voice was ominous and filled with worry, and her words felt like a cold hand grasping Ochako's heart. None of them knew about Deku becoming a pro hero, or the money he was getting, or the interview, or how they wanted to push him as a new symbol of hope. She did, however, and the joy she felt for her friend was starting to turn into worry and preoccupation. The best advice I can give you is to try to keep treating him the way you did during your first year of school. Remind him that you're still there for him and that above everything else, he's still your friend. She then made a pause, before turning her head at Ochako. Or, well, whatever your relationship with him ends up becoming. A. Sue reached with her tongue to catch Ochako before she floated out of the room and left her hovering over her assigned bed like a big, adorably embarrassed, crimson balloon. We understand, Ribbit. Yeah, we're all excited to see him again and we definitely have a lot to ask him, but we'll do our best to make sure he's okay. We don't want to make things harder for him. I'm sure he'll be grateful for it, 13 said, nodding at them. Very well. I will check on Yaoyorozu, Tokiyami, and Koda. I'll be back with you in a minute, hopefully with Recovery Girl. Once again, great job. I'm proud to be your teacher. Mina and Suyu bowed their heads with big smiles on their faces, while Ochako struggled to sit up before dropping her quirk. Wait, she asked when 13 turned around to leave. What is it? Could I maybe ask for a phone? She said, her heartbeat returning to a healthy pace. I would like to call my parents. Of course. The space hero reached down into one of her shoes and pulled a phone out of it like it was the most normal thing in the world, handing it to a dumbfounded Ochako. Here you go, don't read my texts, though. I won't, she said, grabbing the phone with two fingers. Once 13 left the room, Mina and Sue began to talk with each other, giving Ochako a small sense of privacy as she turned around and looked at the phone. It was fancier than any phone she'd ever held, and for a second she wasn't even sure how to navigate it. Fortunately, she was young enough to figure out the phone OS and open the keyboard to make a call. She stopped for a second, realizing that she didn't remember her mom's phone number. What about her dad's? It ended on 3642. That part was easy because 3 was half of 6 and 4 was 2 times 2, but how did it start? It wasn't until she said it out loud that she managed to get it right. Or at least it sounded right, and she hoped she hadn't dialed a wrong number as she waited for someone to pick up on the other side. Hello, a voice said with urgency, and Ochako sighed in relief. Daddy, it's me, Ochako. Honey, it's Ochako, he said, and she could hear the sound of her mother rushing next to her dad. I'm on it, Ochako, you're on speakers. Honey, your aunt called us at work. Her mom interrupted, speaking over her husband. We were so scared. We ran to the nearest bar to look at the news. When we saw those villains blowing up the building. Oh, God, we were so worried. Hearing the pain and worry in her mom's voice resurfaced all the fear that Ochako had stubbornly buried within her. When her life was on the line, there was no time to be scared, only to act. And between the adrenaline and her reunion with Izuku, she had been distracted enough to stop thinking about it now that her mom brought up how worried she was. However, Ochako was able to sit back and think of how close she'd been to dying. All it would have taken was one bad move, one miscalculated step, and she wouldn't have made it out alive. The fact that she only had a relatively minor injury on her hand was nothing short of a miracle. And now that all those moments where she barely avoided dying flashed through her mind, she felt goosebumps running down her spine, and her whole body shaking. I know, but I'm okay. I made it out okay. Don't worry, she said, struggling to contain the tears. My friends are also okay. I'm sorry for worrying you. I didn't have my phone with me. It's okay, sweetie. We were so worried, but then we saw you on TV. Huh, you did. Everyone saw you. Her mom said. The whole town is sending us messages. Our friends. even our clients. You're on every news channel. Yes, everyone's talking about your friend with green hair, but people from around here recognize the brave hero that saved him and helped him up. Ochako, we're so proud of you. Dad, Mom, he deserves all the credit. He's incredible. I just. I didn't. Don't say that. I mean, yeah, he was amazing, but people are asking us about you too. They want to know more about gravity. I'm going to record every news channel tonight. Your picture helping your friend when he lifts his arm like All Might is everywhere. My baby girl is getting famous. We always knew you would make it to the headlines. Ochako, you trained so hard to get ready for the entrance exam. You moved to a different city on your own to chase after your dreams. And now it's coming true. Honey, you should be proud of yourself. We know we are. Those words broke her down and she let the tears fall uninterrupted. Suyu walked towards her and hugged her, as her parents kept talking in her ear, telling her what a fine young hero she had become, and how much they believed in her. Recovery Girl arrived shortly after, but any lingering pain she could still feel was long forgotten. Izuku didn't check with the clock on the wall in front of his bed, but he assumed he and his mom spent a solid half hour simply holding each other and crying as soon as Ochako left. For 15 years, they had been each other's world. She had been his best friend during childhood, the only person he could truly, unconditionally count on. And he was the light of her life, a hero without a cape or quirk that made her days bearable. Never causing any trouble, always so predisposed to help, open to talk, facing adversity with a bright smile and a positive attitude. For so many years, and up until he entered UA, there had never been a day in which they didn't see each other. And then, a couple of weeks ago, he'd left. Not to go to campus, where she knew he'd be surrounded by friends and teachers, but off on his own to act as a vigilante. Sleeping in the streets, fighting villains, running away from the law and enemies that wanted him dead. Alone. Their goodbye had been terrible for both of them, for even though he had promised that he'd be back, they both knew it was but a hope and not a certainty. Fulfilling that promise was cathartic. They shared a never ending hug that healed any wound, that filled the mother son shaped hole in their respective hearts. All the pain, the sleepless nights, the spilled tears, it all vanished with their reunions. It made it all worth it had it not been for the knocking on the door. They probably would have stayed in silence for much longer, but all in all, Izuku would be glad for the interruption. As good as it felt being able to shut his mind off and just enjoy his mom's warmth, they had much to talk about, and when Inko stood up to answer, he felt ready to have those much delayed conversations. Inko opened the door to the room and took a sharp breath when she saw the two short figures. Principal Nezu, she said. Good afternoon, Mrs. Midoriya, the furry principal said. Sorry for bothering you, but Recovery Girl is ready to help heal your son. It shouldn't take long. May we? Why, yes. Of course. Please, come in. She stepped aside, and Izuku was greeted with the sight of the ever-smiling Nezu and the serene youthful heroine as they walked into the room towards his bed. Principal Nezu, Recovery Girl, he said, sitting up but wincing at the pain in his bones. Don't you move, young boy. The last thing we want is you falling to pieces, the nurse said, approaching him and eyeing him up. Ha, no broken bones. Just some bruised ribs and a few strained muscles, he told her, resting back against the bed. Impressive. It only took you a year to start taking care of your body. Is this a one-time thing, or have you learned your lesson? I think I got around to understanding how One for All works, he said, raising a hand and turning it in front of his eyes, staring at the scars that coated it. I know all the quirks in it, how to use them, and what its limits are. Back in my first year, I wasn't able to use 100% of my power without breaking my bones. Now I can. Today I fought even past that limit, and I was alright. I think I finally made this quirk my own. Recovery Girl smiled at him and let out a small sigh. That's good to hear. I'm sure you'll use it the way All Might hoped you would. Now stay put. This'll take much less energy than I thought, but with how hard you fought, you're probably gonna need a good night's rest anyway. And without giving him time to say anything or to thank her for those kind words about his mentor, her lips stretched to plant a kiss on his forehead. He could feel all the pain disappearing from his body right away, and also the sudden tiredness that he experienced every time his life force was used to heal him. He moved his arms around and was startled to see that he felt like new. Oh, wow, he said, bending his elbows. It never felt this good so fast before. Another incentive not to break your bones, she retorted, walking back next to the principal, who took a step forward with his hands behind his back. Young Midoriya, may I have a few words before leaving you and your mother for the day? Sure, sir. What is it? Nezu casually stood up on a chair next to Izuku's bed, reaching eye level with his former student. There are a couple of quick things I'd like to address. For starters, I thank you for your timely arrival today. It would be unfair to dismiss the impact that the ex-students, pro-heroes, and parents that showed up had in the battle, but it's undeniable that you managed to turn the tide against some of the most dangerous villains. You were also key in stopping All for One from finishing off the students and ex-students that were taking care of young Eri, not to mention ultimately defeating him. So, as the principal of UA High School, you have my eternal gratitude for saving my students and staff. The pro-hero proceeded to bow his head, his smile never leaving his face. Principal Nezu, it's okay, I wouldn't. Secondly, he continued, ignoring Izuku, I apologize to you for all the inconveniences that my administration of the school has caused you ever since you entered our hero course last year. Our efforts to keep you all safe have been subpar. I'm aware that no amount of apologies could ever make up for our failures. I can't promise that this won't happen again, since it was never our intention for any of it to occur in the first place, but I can give you my word that we'll do our best to learn from our mistakes and make it up to all of you. Izuku tried to say that there was no reason to apologize, that it had all been part of the diabolic game of chess that All for One had orchestrated, but he realized that he would not be allowed to retort. Thirdly, I have been engaging in negotiations and talks with the Hero Public Safety Commission, and I've been informed of their decisions regarding your future, including the granting of your pro-hero license. While not unheard of, you are but the sixth youngest hero to have ever been granted a full license. It is most certainly an extraordinary situation, and, logically, you may feel overwhelmed or confused as to how to proceed. In the name of the staff of UA, I assure you that we will all be at your disposal should you ever feel the need to seek out advice or any sort of assistance. Feel free to reach out to us. That's very kind of you, sir. Thank you. No worries. Fourthly, I've been told by 13 that some of your friends are concerned about your academic future. I hereby assure you that, should you wish to return to UA, our institution will be more than happy to have you back. Izuku's face lit up, and he opened his mouth to thank him, but Nezu resumed his speech. These are extraordinary circumstances, of course, but we believe that our duty is, above everything, to guide and teach the new generation of heroes. We may look past some formalities to help train someone who is now officially a pro hero. However, given that you've missed several weeks' worth of classes, you will be required to take a proficiency exam to determine how far behind, if at all, you are from your classmates. And it would be your responsibility to catch up with the lessons already imparted. That is, again, should you wish to come back to our institution. Yes, of course, I want that. There's nothing I'd like more. He rushed to say, not wanting to give the principal a chance to interrupt him again. Very well. We shall figure out the details in the following days. UA will be taking a few days off to figure out a plan to rebuild our campus and how to continue our classes. We'll let you know along with the rest of our students. With that settled, the last thing I would like to bring up is that we believe it would be for the best for you and your friends to stay here for the night while we and the Hero Public Safety Commission work out a strategy to relocate your friends that have lost their rooms with the attack on the school dorms. In your particular case, we want to figure out a security protocol to make sure you're not targeted by any rogue villain. Uh, yeah, sure. I wouldn't mind spending the night here. Excellent. Well, I won't steal any more of your time. Again, thank you for your service, Midoriya. Or perhaps I should start calling you by your hero name. Thank you, Deku. No, Principal Nezu, thank you. For letting me come back to UA. But also for training me everything I did today. I was able to do because I attended the best school ever. Nezu's smile remained unchanged, but he closed his eyes for a second. We shall try to live up to that title. Let us know if you need anything. Goodbye for now. Thank you for your time, Mrs. Midoriya. The principal and recovery girl left the room, and Izuku, now completely painless, sighed in relief. He hadn't considered the possibility that he wouldn't be allowed back into UA, but having confirmation that he was invited by the principal still did wonders to his mood. There was nothing he wanted more than to go back to class with his friends, to have lunch with them, to stay up with Iida and Kirishima to study for tests, to play games with Kaminari and Asui, to go shopping with Mina and Aoyama. UA was his special place in the world. It was there where he felt appreciated, where he made friends, where he met amazing people. The building may have been destroyed, but UA was the people, the students, the staff. He was confident that it could be rebuilt, and he was looking forward to going back. He shifted his head to look at his mom, and only then did he realize that she was stiff as a statue, her expression blank like she had seen a ghost, mouth agape. Mom, what's wrong? Inko's head moved to face her son, her shocked expression not changing in the slightest. Aizu. Ku. Yes. What did he mean by P-Pro Hero license? Izuku stared at her. Inko stared at him. He finally clicked his tongue, gently clapping his hands in front of his chest. Reet. Sue. Mom. Funny story. Dash dot. Whereas Izuku's time on a hospital bed had almost always been spent in pain and a crippling sense of uselessness that made time move as if chronostasis had stabbed it with the hour hand of his hair, the rest of the day was oddly comforting for Izuku. It took about an hour and a doctor to get Inko to calm down from the emotional impact of learning that her son was about to become a licensed hero. They had to take her pressure just to make sure she wasn't about to faint, which Izuku was sure she was about to, but after that, it had all been amazing. He was able to finally catch up with his mom, telling her about his past few weeks, though he kept the gruesome details for himself. Whatever worries and fears his tales caused her, however, paled in comparison to the joy of everything he'd been told earlier about what the future held in store for him. She cried a river, and he may or may not have shed a few tears as well, but soon enough they focused on the positive things. The big meal she was going to cook him as soon as he got out of the hospital. All the clothes they could go shopping for. The all-might flip-flops she bought at the mall during his absence. And his future, as well. The word, proud, didn't make justice to what she felt inside, and she made sure he knew it. And he did. A nurse checked on him at night when they brought him dinner, and his body seemed to be responding well to Recovery Girl's quirk. No bruises were left, and only minor scrapes remained on his body. After eating, he told Inko that he was starting to feel exhausted, and so he closed his eyes and tried to go to bed early. The softness of a mattress and a pillow felt alien after so many nights of sleeping against the driest brick wall he could find. Regardless, it had been one hell of a physically draining day and an emotional roller coaster, and thus he had soon found himself falling under Morpheus' spell. He realized he was asleep when the hospital room around him turned into a different room. A familiar one, with white, broken walls, a void of darkness around it, and the 8 previous users of One for All staring at him, each one from their cathedra. Izuku took a step forward, already used to these unexpected meetings with his predecessors. So, All Might said, from the chair closest to his right, "What is it that you want us to discuss, young Midoriya?" Me, Izuku asked, furrowing his brow and looking at the vestige of his mentor. I thought you wanted to talk to me. We did not call for this meeting, Yoichi said. We were summoned by you. But, I wasn't trying to get in touch with you. Not tonight. Well, we're all here, so you might as well speak what's on your mind, Daigoro said, throwing his hands behind his head. Even if you didn't actively call for us, there is a part of you that wanted to talk. Is there anything on your mind? Asked Hikage, the 4th user. Izuku had to stop to think for a second. The truth is that there was a lot on his mind. The fact that he'd finally defeated All for One. His reunion with his friends and family. Everything that was on the horizon for him. Becoming a pro hero and having to think of maybe starting his agency. He wouldn't even know where to begin, but were they things he wanted to discuss with the previous users of One for All? Maybe, but it felt like something other heroes in the real world could help him with. He had tremendous respect for his predecessors, he wouldn't bother them for something so trivial. We are a part of you now, Izuku, Nana Shimura told him, snapping him out of his thoughts. Don't be afraid to ask for advice on anything, you'll never be a bother. Izuku blushed and covered his mouth. Sorry, was I muttering? Nana gave him a smirk. No, then how? Wait a minute, you can all read my mind, he pointed out, remembering that crucial detail. It's less reading your mind, and more like feeling your emotions and getting a sense of what you're going through, Yoichi explained. Then you already know why I wanted to talk to you, even if I don't. And if I'm not fully conscious of it, and you're also aware of that, but you felt it and then this happened, doesn't that mean that you summoned me and not the other way around? he asked with a confused look on his face. All 8 vestiges remained in silence for a solid minute, exchanging nervous looks, until All Might erupted in laughter. I told you he would figure it out. Oh, Daigoro, he knows you're tough, it's okay to show that you care. Watch your words, Toshinori, I might punch you back to your skeleton form. The fourth user said, standing up and pointing an accusing finger at All Might, who laughed harder. Alright, alright, let's get the testosterone levels down, Nana asked, turning to look at Izuku. Yes, you're right, we wanted to talk to you. We don't want to meddle in your personal life or anything, so we prefer it if you're the one looking first, but we could sense some worries in you, and we felt it was for the better if we addressed them. Can you figure out what we'd feel compelled to address with you? That was an interesting angle. If the vestiges didn't want to meddle with his personal life, then it had to be something related to One for All. And now that he was forced to think about it, there was indeed one big question that lingered inside his heart, and that he would feel much better knowing the answer to. He sighed and scratched the back of his head with his right hand, messing up his green hair. I guess I've been thinking of something in the last couple of hours. It took him a few seconds to find the best way to verbalize his feelings, and he was grateful that the previous users gave him all the time he needed. Are you gonna stay with me? He finally asked, looking at them. Their faces seemed imperturbable, with some of them barely tilting their heads as they stared at him with curious eyes. Their silence pushed him to continue. Ida, I mean, we defeated All for One. We did it. We won. Wasn't that the point of One for All? All of you gave your lives for this. You trained me, and you did it well. You helped me learn your quirks, you lend me your strength, and now it's over. So, what's next? For you, for us. He almost continued but bit his tongue instead. He decided he had gotten the point across. Besides, if they could feel his emotions the way they said they could, then it would be redundant to talk about how much he'd grown fond of them, how much he appreciated them, how he had gotten used to hearing their voices and their pieces of wisdom during his weeks going rogue. How much he would miss them should they fade away from his life. How looking and speaking to the vestige of All Might was the only thing to keep him from losing his mind and cope with the fact that he hadn't been strong enough to save him. This is indeed a turning point, the second user agreed, resting his elbows on his knees and his chin over his balled up fists. The main goal behind all of our efforts was to get this power to grow strong enough to defeat All for One, to end his reign of terror and the spread of his influence. And you've done it. But we're not gonna leave you, Yoichi assured Izuku, looking at his immediate successor. While it's true that we gave our lives trying to stop All for One, this torch we passed was never supposed to be one of hatred and revenge, but one of hope and caring. It all started with a helping hand, after all. Toshinori made me realize how we were all looking at it from the wrong angle, Nana said, looking at her disciple with a smile on her face. I had it as my mission to simply grow stronger to be able to kill All for One. I didn't do much hero work because my priorities were skewed. But then I met him, a boy that wished to become a hero to spread joy and be a pillar of hope. And it was then when I understood that it takes something more important than just power to defeat evil: kindness. Even without fighting him for most of his career, Toshinori was able to defeat All for One by dismantling his influence, bringing hope back to the people. That is right, young Midoriya. I know for a fact that you aim for the same goals. Your heart is in the right place. You want to help others, and make people remember why they admired heroes in the first place. As long as you stay on such a noble path, we will always stand beside you, doing our best to guide you if you were to ask for our help. The rest of the users agreed, nodding in his direction, and Izuku felt much better. Besides, you haven't mastered all of our quirks just yet, Daigoro said, raising a fist in the air. You still have a lot to learn. And this is the first time one of us could awaken the rest of the quirks, so we're excited to find new ways of combining them. He means he is excited to find new ways of combining them, the third user quipped. He won't shut up about how to use our quirks to improve his black whip. Hell yeah, it's great by itself, but imagine the possibilities if you keep training to use them at the same time. You mean like combos? Have you thought about some? Izuku asked, his hyperfixation with quirk analysis resurfacing with a smile on his face as he sprinted closer to Daigoro's cathedra. The kid should be resting, not having another training lesson while he's sleeping, En said, crossing his legs over his seat while the rest of the users simply sighed. He's right, Daigoro. We've invaded his mind for many moons now. I think he's earned a night of peaceful dreaming, Yoichi suggested. Fiend. But kid, you better come up with cool special moves for my black whip. Izuku couldn't help but laugh. I will, I promise. Thank you, all of you. I really appreciate it. He thought they'd at least say goodbye to him but was surprised to sense a wind rising from out of nowhere, and a white glow soon enveloping the entire room they were in. Before he knew it, he was dreaming. And for the first time in weeks, his dreams didn't turn into nightmares. The next morning, Best Jeanist came to check on Izuku and Inko. He brought him a change of new clothes, including red sneakers, denim pants, a candlelight orange shirt that said, Summertime, in big, white letters, and a white and green varsity jacket with Jeanist's agency logo on the chest. I swear it's not a cheap product placement, the pro hero explained as Izuku changed into the new outfit, looking at some papers on an old-fashioned clipboard, but I offered to cover for temporary outfits for the affected UA students that lost their dorms in the attack. And I ran out of generic clothes. How bad were the damages to the dorms? Did my friends lose everything? The damage was absolute. Some things were recovered, but for the most part, everyone is to assume that all their belongings are destroyed. The insurance company's gonna try to delay it, but given the magnitude and high profile of this case, the government will surely intervene to make sure everyone's compensated. Izuku experienced a weird case of survivor's guilt. Since he hadn't returned to his third semester at UA, he had all his belongings in his apartment. His friends, however, had pretty much lost everything. He felt bad for people like Kyoka and all her musical instruments, or Fumikage and his esoteric relics. He then thought of Ochako, and how she didn't have much, but she cared for every little thing in there. Knowing her, she would probably feel terrible. He wondered if there was anything he could. He stopped everything from his train of thought to his muscles, almost tripping forward as he was in the middle of tying his shoes. Oh, God. Oh, dear God. What about UI-chan, Koda's little rabbit? A word of warning. Today is going to be harsh for you, Genist said, putting the clipboard aside and giving Izuku a worried look from over his collar. Agent Mara will return soon to talk about some new developments. And then, you'll be able to go back to your house. And that means facing the media. Izuku sighed, sitting on his bed and glancing at his mom. I know. The president of the Hero Public Safety Commission already explained that you'll be giving your interview during the week, but that's not gonna stop the reporters. With the announcement that your hero license has been legally granted already, the media won't be able to follow you to your home. Heroes' residences are protected from media exposure by the law, so at the very least you won't be bothered there. Alas, this means they'll swarm over you the moment you step out of the hospital. It would be rude to just brush them off. You could get away with it, but I agree that it won't look good as a first impression. So what do I do, then? Do I stop to take questions? How many questions should I take? Do I answer all of them? What should I keep for the interview? What if I stutter? Is my hair okay? Should I get a haircut? I need to practice my smile. Midoriya, stop before you start spiraling. Izuku sighed, and Inko extended a hand to place it on her son's knee. Honey, maybe you just need to be yourself. Myself. But, myself is, I'm boring. I'm not a very interesting person. Nonsense. I believe you should listen to your mother, Midoriya. While we heroes must pay close attention to the way we present ourselves, knowing that we're supposed to be role models for citizens, children, and future heroes, we must stay true to ourselves. Izuku thought about his training with Mount Lady. Giving interviews didn't count between his many strengths. It counted among his great weaknesses, right next to singing and his inability to lick his elbow like Asui had challenged him that one time. Even if he tried to prepare himself for what was about to come, he knew that he would draw a blank the moment he was in the spotlight with microphones, cameras, and journalists surrounding him. There was no way he would be able to avoid making a fool out of himself. It was important to do it, he understood that. Besides raw power, the greatest difference between All Might and every other hero had always been his public image. His smile, his authenticity, his impeccable behavior with fans and the press. If he wanted to follow his steps, he would need to face the adversity and do what had to be done, even if he was afraid. Okay, that's true. I'll just be myself. Here's a pro tip. When dealing with a bunch of journalists asking many questions at the same time, ignore what they ask and just give general statements, or answer the questions you want. You don't have to worry about what they want to know right now, go out there. Stop when they don't let you walk anymore. Say how you're feeling and what you're looking forward to. Thank them for their patience. Give the audience at home some caring words, and then move on. Would that really work? You'd be surprised by how many heroes never listen to what they're being asked, Genus mentioned, shaking his head and picking up the clipboard once again. But enough worrying about that. You're gonna have a busy day, but we thought we would start by letting you receive visits if that's okay with you. A lot of people are worried, and we thought it would do you good to see them before attending to other responsibilities. You mean my friends? The green haired boy asked, his face lighting up with excitement. Yes. Oh, absolutely. I'd love to see them. I've missed them so much. He did, and his joy was genuine, but he made sure to stop his hands from shaking and to conceal his worry and the insecurity that consumed him from the inside like a wildfire. Instead, he focused on the positive feelings he wanted to showcase at his mother and the pro hero. Very well. They're waiting on this floor, so I'll give the order and they'll come in, Mrs. Midoriya. While your son meets his friends, would you come with me to work on some documentation? Oh, yes, of course, Inko said, turning to hide and fan her blushing face. Izuku groaned. Within a day, She had forgotten his anger at the pro-hero to remember that she had been collecting his magazines for 8 years. The two adults left the room, and as soon as he was alone, Izuku allowed himself to blow out the air he had been holding in his lungs and began to rub his fingers together. This reunion was something he had thought about from the first day he left, and even though his weeks had been busy and he found himself escaping from death much more often than he intended, he still daydreamed about this moment every day. It was his goal to return to them, the reward at the end of the line, the thing he was fighting for, but he knew that it wouldn't be all good. He held fears inside, and his reunion with Ochako had only proved that at least some of them were warranted. He wanted this to happen, and he hoped it would all be for the best. There was a gentle knock on his door. Gentle by Death Arm's standards, at least, which meant it was about 3.9 on the Richter scale. Izuku rubbed his hands together one more time until they were warm, and stood up with a little jump. "See, come on in, please," he said, taking a big breath. Death Arms opened the door, and right away, the ever-so-correct Tenya Iida stepped into the room. "Very well, friends, let's all get inside one at a time, and remember to stay collected so as to not disturb Midoriya's recovery and mental state. We talked about our internal protocols regarding this situation, so stay calm and do not engage in any sudden." Midoriya AAA. Tenya was pushed into the wall by the rest of the class, who for the most part stampeded into the room to get closer to Izuku. Seeing their smiling faces, all of them with casual clothes that in some cases showed Best Jeanist's agency logo, his initial fears were tamed. Their demeanor said everything he needed to know at first. They were happy to see him. So he allowed himself a few minutes to rejoice in their reunion and their affection. They all talked over each other, and he couldn't make out what they were saying, but he didn't mind. What would have long ago made him go red in the face and probably pass out no longer seemed to affect him, so he even reciprocated the hugs that Tsuyu, Mina, and Toru gave him. He also accepted the bro hugs from Rikido and Denki. He laughed at Tenya moving his arms like an aircraft signalman, openly distressed about the lack of respect for his personal space. He also caught a glimpse of Ochako, standing slightly to the side to give their friend space, and he smiled at her. She had her hands behind her back, but the moment he flashed her a smile she returned the gesture and waved her right hand. Izuku was also aware of Katsuki leaning against the wall farthest away from him. Their eyes met and he scowled, but after looking away for an instant, he reluctantly nodded. Izuku smiled, but that seemed to piss his childhood friend. It was only then that Izuku realized there was someone else standing in a corner of the room. Wearing some colorful clothes that he didn't seem to be particularly happy about, Shinso stood there, looking like he wasn't sure he belonged. Izuku was about to call him, but an arm gently shoved him back and away from his friends. "All right, all right, all right, that is enough," Tenya said, standing in between Izuku and the rest of the class. "As your class representative, I am disappointed with the way you broke the protocols we established to not overwhelm our friend. We all saw the way he battled yesterday, so we know he must still feel exhausted after injuring himself to that level. It is our duty as heroes, fellow classmates, and most importantly friends to look after him and make sure he is fine." Iida, Izuku tentatively asked. "Why yes, Midoriya, what is it?" the tall boy asked, turning around stiff as a robot. I didn't really hurt myself that much yesterday. I didn't break any bones this time, which feels weird. So, I guess what I'm saying is that I don't mind it. He offered, shrugging a bit. Oh, that is outstanding news, Midoriya. I'm glad to hear you didn't injure yourself. With that being the case, then allow me to extend my sincerest gratitude for your opportune arrival at the battlefield yesterday. You were able to turn the tide, giving us a morale boost to rise to the occasion and go plus ultra. On the same note, I am most pleased to finally see you back. I must confess we were quite worried, he said, extending a hand to shake. Some of his friends chuckled at Ida's overly formal speech, but Izuku felt relieved and glad to hear him. Same old Iida. One of his best and oldest friends, as well. He shook his hand with gusto. I'm glad to be back, Iida. I missed you. I missed all of you, guys. The feeling was mutual, Midoriya, Fumikage mentioned, nodding with his head. Man, we were so worried when you left, Honta said. We felt terrible for not realizing sooner the truth about your quirk. The signals were there. We just brushed them off as something trivial. I personally feel terrible, confessed Momo, her hands pressed against her cardigan. As your friend and class vice representative, I should have known better. I promise I won't fail you again. No, no, guys, stop, Izuku said, waving his hands frantically. It's me who should be apologizing. Not you. Midoriya, you have nothing to apologize for. Mashirao assured him. Yeah, we get why you needed to keep that stuff a secret. All for One was after you. Dude. We get it, Denki said. I just wished we could have been more helpful. I don't know how much we could have done, Shoto said, rubbing his left hand with his eyes lost on the floor. According to the news, the kind of fugitives Midoriya was going after were several tiers above our capabilities. Speak for yourself, icy hot. Yeah, we heard the news last night. They're saying you went after that muscular dude. And many other fugitives, locking them up on your own. That's so manly. Izuku turned to look at Eijiro to shrug off the compliment, but the moment he managed to get a look at his friend's face, the color drained from his own. Kirishima. Oh, no, what happened? Are you okay? Izuku asked, his hand hesitating in the air like he wanted to reach out to Red Riot. Oh, this, the sturdy hero said with a smile, pointing a thumb at the patch that was big enough to cover his left eye, but not tall enough to completely hide the red line that ran vertically from his forehead to his cheekbone. Yeah, I kinda lost an eye yesterday. It was like a gut punch. The mood of the entire room fell, and Izuku himself felt his knees go weak. Acid bile gathered at the base of his stomach, and the world seemed to stop moving for an instant. And he managed to mutter. Yeah, I had to switch between regular hardened and unbreakable a lot, and at some point, I wasn't fast enough. Not gonna lie, it hurt like hell at the time, but now I'm doing okay. And you? Did recovery girl? Hiroshima put his hands on his hips and shook his head. Nah, it's gone. But don't worry, dude. None of the first years under my watch were hurt, and I take that as an absolute win. Izuku turned to look at the rest of his friends. Did any of you also get hurt? Well, we were all hurt. But, like, seriously injured. Tenya was the first one to speak. If you are truly curious, Then I shall mention that the heat of my Plus Ultra Recipro Turbo did a number on the muscles around the engine, he mentioned, looking over at his calves. It doesn't seem to be permanent damage yet, but the doctors warned me that a repeat of that could permanently atrophy the muscle. Yesterday was the first time I ever broke my tail, Masharao pointed out, and Izuku could now see a bump on his tail that wasn't there before. I have a pretty nasty burn mark on my back, Mineta mentioned. And I have this ugly scar on my shoulder, they heard Toru say, and they assumed she was using an invisible hand to point at her invisible shoulder. Izuku looked at the rest of his friends, waiting to hear if anyone else got a lingering wound, but no one seemed to have anything beyond superficial cuts, bruises, or bumps. They all stayed in silence as he examined them, maybe trying to determine on his own if they were hurt. He looked at Ochako, and she was biting her lower lip, but she seemed to be physically well. While that was good, it didn't ultimately help his mood. His friends had been hurt. Hiroshima lost an eye. Their belongings were destroyed during the attack. It was all unnecessary pain, and in his mind, he could have done better. He should have done better. Guys, you all got so hurt, he said, clenching his fists and shaking with impotence. I'm so sorry. Hey, don't worry, Jiro said, getting a good read of Izuku's emotions. We all made it out alive. That's all that matters. No, it's more than that. He saw the worry in his friend's eyes, and unbeknownst to them, that was precisely the last thing he wanted to see. In a move that surprised them all, he took a step back before dropping to his knees and then bending forward into a full dogeza, his forehead pressed against the floor. He heard a gasp and his name being called with awkwardness and confusion. However, he stood there, took a deep breath, and proceeded to apologize from the bottom of his heart. I owe all of you an apology. You guys, you've been nothing but kind to me ever since I got into UA. You've made me feel, well, like I fit in, like I was a peer and not just dead weight, or an annoyance. Pine, he heard Aoyama say. Midoriya, hang on. You don't. Mezzo started, stepping forward, but Izuku had a lot to say. Please, let me say this. I need to say it. We couldn't see them, but he took their silence as an invitation to continue. The cold floor of the hospital wasn't pleasant against his forehead, but keeping those feelings inside of his chest felt much worse. You guys have always been so supportive and honest with me, and I can't help to feel that. I've been lying to you guys since the beginning. I lied about my quirk. I made you think I had super strength that I couldn't control, but, as you probably know by now, that's not true. He had to take a new breath, and he clenched his fists and his toes, his whole body tensing like he was about to receive a hit. I was born quirkless. There was nothing special about me, but I just so wanted to become a hero. And then, a few months before the entrance exam to UA, I met All Might. And the day of the exam, he gave me his quirk, one for all. You were all training hard to master your quirks and become great heroes, while I was simply given all this power. It, it doesn't seem fair. I know I had to keep it a secret because of All for One, but I had to lie to all of you. I'm so sorry. I really am. And then in April, I had to leave, and I know I worried you all. I just left a quick letter instead of talking. The truth is that I was afraid of talking with you. I didn't know how you guys would take this. I'd understand if you're mad at me, you have every right to be. Before you, I never had many friends and to be honest, afraid of losing you. He wanted to repeat once again that he was sorry, but the words got stuck in his throat. Instead, he just remained there, hoping that they would accept his apology and forgive him for being so dishonest and deceiving. It especially hurt when it came to his best friends. Ochako had been so open about her family's struggles, Iida had always been so supportive and attentive after the incident with Stain, Tsuyu had helped him train with Black Whip. And Shoto. He heard some footsteps, and someone crouching next to him. And then, they grabbed his hands, their thumbs running circles on the back of his hands, and he decided to look up. His eyes found Ochako's bright smile, her lips curved up, and her eyes looking at him with understanding and compassion. Deku, we forgive you, she said, seemingly speaking for the entire class. She then began to stand up without letting go of his hands, and Izuku was forced to follow her example and stand facing his friends. But you have it all backward. You didn't become a hero because you got an amazing quirk from All Might. All Might gave you his quirk because you were always a hero at heart. Uraraka is right, Iida intervened, stepping closer to Izuku. Ochako seemed to realize then that she was still holding his hands and promptly released him. You must remember. The reason why you passed the entrance exam wasn't because of your power. You passed because, unlike the rest of us, you showed the heart of a true hero. Say come saw, Aoyama agreed. We all ran from the danger, worried about our points and passing the test, but you didn't hesitate to jump and save a stranger from getting hurt. Besides, it's not like you make it out to be, Kirishima pointed out. You talk like you were given the greatest quirk ever without doing anything to earn it, but we all saw you, man. You trained twice as hard as everyone else. When you started, you couldn't land a hit without breaking your bones, but you never stopped training and getting stronger to get better at managing your quirk. If you ask me, that makes it even more impressive. You say that, because you were born quirkless, it means you didn't earn your quirk, but I'm sure you were given it because you proved yourself worthy of it, Koda pointed out with a cheerful tone. Precisely, Tokiyami followed up. If anything, the rest of us were the ones that were given an unfair advantage. We were born with our abilities, we didn't ask or earn them. Your fears, while I can understand them, aren't correct. Midoriya, we're not gonna stop being your friends. Mina pointed out, sounding worried that he would even entertain that idea in his head. You say we've been kind to you, but you've honestly been nothing but the most supportive friend ever. You're always ready to help and make us feel important and cool. Don't sell yourself short. You also did a lot for us. If it wasn't for you, I probably would have never accepted the other half of my quirk, Shoto said, his hands resting in his pockets. Even though I had challenged you and you could have beaten me, you gave away your victory just to help me. That meant a lot. I won't forget it. All of his friend's words were wonderful, and they made him feel much better. But he was finding it hard to look at Shoto and not feel like he'd failed him. Todoroki, I can't apologize enough, he said, lowering his head. I thought I could defeat all for one, but I couldn't, and because Midoriya, he cut him short, and Izuku looked up to meet his heterochromatic gaze. I don't hold you responsible for the actions of my father. He died trying to stop all for one. It wasn't your fault. I don't want you feeling guilty for that, especially since I think we both lost a father figure that day. Not even his heaven-piercing ice wall would have felt as cold as Izuku's blood right then. His friends also seemed to accuse the hit. their hearts aching at the memory of their former teacher and pro-hero. But their Shoto was right. All Might had been much more than a teacher for Izuku. He could tell that Shoto genuinely didn't blame him for Endeavor's demise, but it was hard for Izuku to not feel responsible for both his and All Might's untimely deaths. He would have been dragged into a spiral of misery if it wasn't for someone clearing their throat and stepping closer to him. Izuku looked at Shinso, realizing that he hadn't addressed him yet and feeling embarrassed by that omission. Shinso, Midoriya, I know we're not exactly close, but if I may. Why yeah, sure. I joined Class 2A of the Hero Department this year, he mentioned, looking at the rest of his classmates. I know I'm running behind and that I don't have the memories and experiences together that the rest of you had. But I've been able to see exactly how much you all care for each other, almost like a family. And I've seen how much everyone cares about you. They all hold you in the highest regard. So if you were worried about your situation making it so that they wouldn't like you anymore, well, I'm starting to think that maybe you don't know them as well as you should. Izuku blinked at that. Shinso. Not even once did they mention any sense of frustration or anger aimed at you. There has been nothing but honest worry and kind wishes being sent your way. I may not know them that well, but I can tell you for sure that they're just happy that you're safe. You guys, I don't know what to say, he muttered, trying to find the words to thank them all. There was a groan in the back, and everyone turned to look at Katsuki. Stop apologizing for everything, Deku. He spat out, nonchalantly crossing his arms over his chest. You were a target, so you kept information for yourself to protect these losers and then went away on your own. We get it. We know how hero stuff works. That's what we're all training for, you idiot. Kachan. All these extras missed you. You missed them. End of the story. Stop second guessing yourself and how you got your power. All Might chose you, so that should tell you something unless you don't trust his judgment. What? No, of course I. What you should be focused on is getting even stronger, Bakugo said, walking until he was standing in front of Izuku, because I'm not gonna stop getting better, and if you relax for just 1 second, I'll be there to beat you up and remind you why we're doing this. He made a point of poking him in the chest with a finger, looking as mad with the world as ever. And yet, Izuku could tell that this was as close to a pep talk as he might ever get from Katsuki. He sighed and smiled while Tenya said that it was scandalous that Bakugo would threaten their friend with violence while they were all in a hospital, to which Katsuki replied with insults too nasty for Izuku's taste. He still managed to laugh out, having missed the friendly banter of his classmates. You better not be laughing at me, Deku. Just because you beat me at getting your hero license doesn't mean you're above me, ya hear me? So you guys know about that? He asked, covering his face with his arms. It's all over the news. Toru said, and to prove her point, Rikido grabbed the remote and turned on the TV, that Izuku had ignored all day, and put on a random channel. Lo and behold, the anchorman's voice spoke over footage of Izuku's fight against Todoroki at last year's sports festival, where he could see himself shooting Delaware smashes and breaking one finger at a time. The graph at the bottom asked the question, what is Deku's quirk S? They're talking about you non-stop, Mina said. They're trying to figure out your origin story. I heard a show last night that said you were all for one's bastard child, Mineta said with a playful tone. They think that's why you have so many quirks, but you rejected the path of villainy and you were instead raised by All Might, and that yesterday you finally killed your father to make amends for his mistakes. Isn't that crazy? Oh, God, people are not buying that, are they? Izuku asked, shaking his face paling. Nah, most people just assume there's a secret connection between All Might, All for One, and you. But no one knows what. Sato changed the channel, and by sheer coincidence, the question on the graph there was the relationship between Deku and All Might. 5 journalists and commentators sat on a long, studio table, while a screen behind them showed pictures of last year with All Might and Deku at Island. A big, red circle was drawn to showcase them, even though they were the only 2 people in the picture. My sources confirm that Deku was indeed allowed into the Eye Expo as All Might's guest, one of them said, fixing her glasses. There is no question that they were more than teacher and student. All Might was, at the very least, Deku's mentor far beyond the UA scope. Does this mean that Deku might be the first and only disciple of the great All Might? All evidence points that way. They're talking about me. Midoriya, I believe you should try to get used to it, the sooner the better, Ribbit. Yeah, they said you're gonna be giving a full interview sometime this week, Zero pointed out. So you should try to get ready to tell your story. Speaking of telling your story, Ochako mentioned, smiling at Deku, why don't you start practicing with us? I wanna know everything. Yeah, Uraraka's right. You have to tell us what you were up to these past few weeks. Kirishima said, I'd also like to know about your new quirks, added Tsuyu, pressing a finger against her chin. He could feel everyone's excitement, and focusing on them helped him calm down from his embarrassment of seeing strangers talking about his relationship with All Might. He stared at them for a few seconds. He tried to think of what he would do if one of them had disappeared and come back. He would be curious to know what they had been up to, and he would want to hear all of it. He knew he owed them an explanation, he just didn't think it would happen so early. Looking at their expecting faces, though, he couldn't say no, so he sighed and sat on the edge of his bed. You might wanna get comfortable. I don't wanna keep any more secrets from you, so there's a lot I need to tell you. Ochako, Denki and Koda sat on the bed with him. Some sat on the floor, some took the 3 chairs they had in the room, some leaned against the walls. Once they were all settled in, Izuku looked at the ceiling and bit his lower lip, thinking for a full minute before making up his mind. I guess I should explain more about how I met All Might and got his quirk, he said. He had never shared the details of his past with any of his friends, and to be honest, he didn't feel comfortable talking about it. It felt like a lifetime ago, and it was a chapter of his life that he had turned the page from, and one he didn't want to look back into. His quirklessness had been crucial in him getting one for all and surviving it, however, so he had to start from there. Lost in thought, he was brought back to the world by a hand rubbing his back in small, gentle circles. He turned to look at Ochako, who looked like she was worried but trying her best to reassure him. It's okay, Deku. You're with friends, you have nothing to worry about. He sighed one last time and nodded. She was right, he was overthinking this. He gave her a small smile and then turned to look at the rest of his friends, secretly glad that she kept her hand on his back. Here's the sad truth. All men are not created equal. When I was 4, I learned that some kids have more power than others. Chapter 4 Home. People had been quick to complain about or at the very least take notice of Izuku's verbosity throughout his life. He'd gotten into trouble many times for not going straight to the point and overextending the answers or explanations to straightforward questions. While a useful skill to allow him to share his vast knowledge in written tests, he only needed to be mindful of how much time he had left to write. It had proven time and time again to be detrimental to his social life. People around him never failed to point out every instance of him muttering out loud or getting into long-winded rants, and he'd lost track of how many conversations he'd ruined by not shutting up. Adding to the equation the fact that, growing up, he'd never had any real friends, it wouldn't surprise anyone to learn that he'd never been encouraged to tell stories or talk about himself for long periods. His talks with his mother came to his mind as the closest example he could think of, but even those small summaries of his days at school paled in comparison to the experience of catching his friends up with everything related to One for All. It had been intimidating, at first. He didn't know how much detail was enough, or how vague he could keep things to not make it boring for his friends. The engagement had been far superior to what he'd imagined. They allowed him to talk just shy of 2 hours about himself without making him feel weird about it, and they kept asking questions for him to elaborate on. It made him feel confident, especially with how eager they all looked to learn more about his quirk and his journey to master it. They looked like kids at a campfire, listening to their counselor narrating the most amazing tale ever. They leaned in and took sharp breaths when he got to the dramatic turning points in his life. They let out impressed oohs and ahs when he revealed some of the most amazing parts of his journey. They shook and bit their nails when he went into detail about some of the life or death situations he'd faced. He couldn't have possibly asked for a better audience, one that made him feel more contained and safe. They cheered him up and offered words of encouragement whenever he doubted or criticized himself, or whenever he talked about his many failures and missteps. By the time he concluded talking about himself, Izuku felt liberated. An impossibly heavy weight had been lifted off his shoulders. Keeping the secret from the people he cared the most about had become a great boulder on the uphill trek of life. He hadn't been aware of how much it affected him until then, and the idea that he could show them how much he trusted them certainly helped clear his conscience. He escaped no question and answered everything they inquired about to the best of his ability. His calmness and relief contrasted with the shocked and perplexed demeanors that most of his friends showed. Even the most stoic ones like Fumikage, Shoto, and Shinso stood visibly disturbed by these revelations. Shoto apologized to Izuku for having seemingly contributed to his distress during the sports festival by drawing connections between him and All Might, and even after the joint training, where he briefly accused him of hiding his true powers and potential from him. Izuku wasted no time to dismiss those worries and apologized in turn for the constant lies. All in all, Izuku's heart rested at ease knowing that his classmates didn't blame him or held any grudges for his actions. He knew he had the best friends in the world. He had been well aware of it during his time away from them, but the reunion only further fueled his belief. He made a silent promise right then that he wouldn't let them down ever again. He'd make them proud. They had made it possible for him to grow as much as a hero as he had, not to mention his growth as a person and how they'd made him feel special and loved. He wouldn't run away from them again. He'd protect them. He'd train twice as hard to live up to the ideal they helped him reach, and he'd make sure to support and offer a helping hand every step of the way during their school years. He'd repay them, somehow, someday. Man, Midoriya, this is a lot to take in. Not gonna lie, Eijiro said, brushing his spiky hair up with a hand. Honestly, it makes me feel kinda guilty that I never realized you were going through so much. Yeah, sometimes I saw you looking distracted during dinner, or I thought that maybe you were overdoing your training, Denki pointed out, but now it all kinda makes sense. Well, I mean, it makes total sense. Just, I wouldn't have expected something like this. I mean, I don't blame you. I would have had a hard time believing it if it wasn't happening to me, Izuku conceded. So how many quirks did you learn to control simultaneously? Shoto asked, a hand stroking his chin. Well, there's one for all's base stockpile power quirk, and then 6 more. Though the more I use at the same time, the more my body hurts. And it gets harder to control. Mina mouthed and impressed. Whoa. Mezzo shook his head in disbelief, and Honta snorted. And we thought Todoroki was the prodigy of the class, mastering 2 quirks, the latter said, giving Shoto a playful punch to the shoulder. He didn't say anything, barely nodding his head. S0. Please don't say that, Izuku complained, feeling his cheeks blush slightly. Seriously, guys, I don't want you to treat me any differently after this. I'm not, special or anything like that. Damn right you ain't, you damn nerd. Don't worry, Midoriya. We know, Suyu told him, ignoring Katsuki's outburst. We don't want to make you uncomfortable. Midoriya, I believe I speak for the entire class when I say that we have no intention of making you feel any different than before. Regardless of your undeniably impressive feats and growth as a hero, you are still the same Midoriya Izuku that we've known for over a year now. While it's true that we are quite flabbergasted by everything we've learned, and I believe that there's a certain amount of reasonable worry and newfound appreciation to be had for you in the trials you've faced, the dynamic of our friendship should remain, for the most part, unaffected. At least from my part, I wish to remain as your friend the same way I was before your departure. Tenya then smirked and used his index finger to fix his glasses, before looking at Izuku with a spark of determination that he'd seldom seen on his friend. And forgive me if this may be presumptuous of me, but I believe this might make you feel better. Learning about your escapades and the hero work you've done along with the pros raises the bar I've set for my own expectations. I am determined to work harder to catch up to you, Midoriya, and become a worthy bearer of the Ingenium mantle. I think this is kind of a wake-up call for a lot of us, Mashirao said, cracking his knuckles and smiling at Izuku. At first, there was kind of a power gap between Todoroki, Bakugo, and the rest of us. Then you joined them, but we were all able to follow you guys and stay on track. Now it looks like you took a few extra leaps away from us, and I'm really happy for you, Midoriya, but I'm not gonna be left behind. I'll do my best to catch up with you. We all will, Ochako added, raising a closed fist. We've all gotten stronger, Deku. So next time you have to go do something crazy, we'll be right there with you to have your back. Izuku's chest swelled with pride and his smile beamed at the display of determination and motivation that his friends showed him. Thank you, he told them, closing his eyes and lowering his head for a second, taking a deep breath and feeling better than he could remember being in recent times. You guys, you have no idea how much I needed to hear that. Koji gave him a pat on the back, and when he looked up at his friends, he found them smiling at him. All except for Katsuki, who, aside from a snide remark here and there, had stayed notably silent during Izuku's retelling of his journey. And, perhaps undetected by everyone else, his face displayed a scowl deeper than usual. He had crossed his arms over his chest and set his eyes on the floor, not moving a single inch. He hadn't even looked right at Izuku whenever he addressed him. Izuku knew his friend, and he could tell something bothered him. So, Midoriya, Minoru began, now that the bad guys are all taken care of. Not all of them, Tenya interjected, clenching his fists. Everyone stared at him in silence for a few seconds. The hero killer had notoriously kept a low profile ever since escaping Tartarus. Right. So now that most of the bad guys are taken care of, are you coming back to UA? Izuku's face lit up and nodded vigorously. I talked to Principal Nezu. He said they'll let me back. He made a small pause to let everyone cheer. I'm gonna have to take a proficiency exam to make sure I'm not too far behind, and I need to catch up with all the classes you've already taken, but I'm sure I can do it. I can help you with that. Momo rushed to offer, clapping her hands in front of her chest. I've been writing down all the essentials of our lessons into flashcards to get ready for the exams. I can help you catch up with your homework and any lesson you may have trouble understanding. That would be great, Yaoyorozu. If it's not too much to ask. Nonsense. You've always been a top notch student. Your academic performance shouldn't suffer because you had to deal with more pressing matters outside of school. I'll make sure you have all the resources you need to study. You should trust her, Midoriya, Kyoka said with a mischievous smile. If she can make Kaminari pass his written exams, she'll get you acing your tests in no time. Jiro. Denki complained with faux shock, putting a hand on his chest like he'd been stabbed. Why do you always go for the lowest hanging fruit? The entire class shared a laugh, and Izuku took a moment to appreciate it. Several months had passed since the last time he had ever laughed along with others. He had truly missed it. Death arms knocked on the door, scaring the living crap out of everyone, and seconds later he opened it, revealing a figure all dressed in black, with long, messy, greasy hair covering his right eye and falling past his shoulders. The students stood up with their backs straight, looking at the newcomer. Aizawa sensei, Tenya said. What brings you here? Izuku looked at his former homeroom teacher. The pro hero looked as tired as ever, with his hands in his pockets as he walked into the room. The last time the two had seen each other, Aizawa had cut off one foot and suffered a major injury in his eye when facing Shigaraki. Izuku felt relieved to see him walking without any clutch or visible inconvenience. Midoriya, the pro hero said, ignoring the question and stopping a few steps away from him. Him. How are you feeling? I'm better, Professor. Thank you. Izawa nodded and looked at the rest of his students. Nezu and the Hero Public Safety Commission have finished negotiations. Classes will be suspended for a week for the Hero Department. You may choose to go back to your families, but a hotel has been reserved for those that can't do it or that would rather stay in the city. Regardless of what you choose, a bus is waiting outside to leave the hospital and take all of you there for the time being. None of you require further medical treatment, so we won't be taking more resources from the hospital. Go to your rooms and pick up your costumes. We'll leave in 30 minutes. Only a week, Mina asked, but the entire school was blown up. As we speak, Power Loader is coordinating with the new architect and engineers to work on the design of the new campus, he explained. The original plans can be used, though Nezu asked for a few small changes. Once that's done, the robots should be able to rebuild it within a month. However, you'll be sent somewhere else starting next Monday, so you have 1 week to rest and reflect on everything that's happened. Izuku's heart beat faster. Did that mean that he would also be restarting school in a week? That was so much sooner than he'd imagined. His excitement rocketed through the roof. He could hardly wait. As if reading his mind, Eraserhead looked at Izuku with his good eye. Midoriya. Yes, sir. His eye flickered under the light as if holding a small flame within. You've matured and grown as a hero. You did well. Good job. Izuku had been congratulated many times in the past 24 hours, but it hit differently coming from the pro hero that had been mostly in charge of his education, second to All Might. He pressed his hands together and bowed. Thank you, Professor. Izawa nodded once again before addressing the rest of the class. All right, let's get going. I'm sure you'll see Midoriya soon enough. You heard our homeroom teacher, class. Let's leave on a single file, and remember not to be loud as we walk down the halls. We do not want to disturb the personnel or the resting patients as we go back to our rooms. Following Tenya, all his friends waved goodbye at Izuku, telling him they'd be in touch. Ochako waited until most had left before looking at him with a soft, bright smile, brushing a lock of brown hair behind her ear. Don't do anything crazy while I'm gone, she teased him, though her playful tone couldn't completely conceal a hint of genuine worry. He chuckled. I'll try not to. See y'all later, Deku. See y'all later, Uraraka. She left the room, turning one last time once she passed the threshold to glance back and wave her hand. He waved back at her, with a dumb, happy expression on his face, but the moment she walked out of sight, a part of him felt numb. Like he'd forgotten to tell her something, or like she'd taken something from him that he wanted back. Weird, he thought, as he frowned at the unexpected pang of indistinct emotion. He wanted to shrug it off as having missed his best friend's presence for so long, but he didn't feel that way regarding Iida, and as far as he knew, he appreciated them both equally. Perhaps he forgot to properly thank her for all she'd done for him. He seemed to remember showing his appreciation, but maybe it hadn't been genuine enough. Why did he feel this way? He had to put a pin on his feelings because both he and Eraserhead realized that one student was making no effort to move or leave the room. Bakugo, is there a problem? The teacher asked. Katsuki didn't reply, still frowning at the floor, his lips pursed on a thin line, his explosive personality subdued, making him look more like a time bomb. He clicked his tongue and dropped his arms to the side, walking closer to Izuku. He stopped a few feet in front of him, not meeting his eyes. Kachan, is everything? You didn't tell them the full story. Izuku blinked twice, taken aback by the blunt statement. He tried to make sense of it, but he drew a blank on what he could have possibly missed from the retelling of his life. What's the full story? The question seemed to irritate Katsuki, who buffed and turned his head to the side, shaking it slightly. And only then did Izuku see the concealed regret in his friend's eyes, and only then did he understand what he meant. You told them about growing up quirkless, but you didn't tell them the full story, Katsuki clarified, and Izuku sensed that the anger that poisoned his voice wasn't aimed at him. He forgot about Eraserhead, and instead took a step towards Katsuki, forcing his friend to stare at him and meet his emerald eyes. I told them what they needed to know, he explained, showing his confidence and determination through his tone. The parts that matter. Katsuki kept staring at him, almost daring him to speak up, to add something else, to call him out, but whatever grudge Izuku may have held in any deep corner of his heart had been long gone. So he made sure to reassure Katsuki by not looking away, by meeting his strong gaze with one of his own, channeling his inner Eraserhead to fight the urge to blink. With a sigh, Katsuki looked away, nodding his head to acknowledge Izuku's position, and then promptly turned around. Izuku stared at his friend as he walked away from the room. It felt like they had just shared a moment, but whether Katsuki understood that he had forgiven him long ago or not, he didn't know. Midoriya, the Hero Public Safety Commission will get here shortly, Aizawa said, making Izuku turn to look at his teacher. They have some things to discuss with you. But I have a favor to ask before they get here. Oh right, sure. What is it, Professor? Aizawa pointed a finger at the hall outside of the room. Eri's outside. Eri. Huh, why didn't she come? She's feeling too guilty to see you. Izuku's jaw dropped, and he had to do a double take to make sure that he hadn't misheard him. Guilty. Of what? She blames herself for the attack at the school. She thinks it's her and her quirk's fault that all for one attacked us. She's been asking about you since yesterday. She's worried, but she's also hesitant to come to see you. So she asked me to stay outside, instead. Could you go talk to her? I believe talking to you would help her a lot. To say that Izuku's heart ached at the surreal scenario of Eri blaming herself for a situation that had her as a clear victim would have been the understatement of the century. In the almost 16 years he'd walked the earth, he'd never encountered another individual as pure and innocent as Eri. Recent times had shown him that the world wasn't black or white, that everyone lived in different shades of gray. And yet he would argue that she was pure brightness, physically incapable of hating or holding grudges. She was the kindest person he knew, and just like everyone else at UA, he would fight to protect the smile they'd worked so hard to give her. The idea that she somehow blamed herself for the actions of supervillains hurt him on an emotional level. She deserved nothing but the best. And if she was out there in the hallway suffering for blame she put upon herself, then he'd go out there to rescue her just like he'd gone all out to rescue her from Shisaki and All for One. He nodded at Aizawa and, with his permission, stepped out of his room. Death Arms glanced at him but said nothing, allowing him to look around the hall until he spotted her. She was sitting alone on a bench, wearing her white dress shirt with a red pinafore, her legs swinging aimlessly in the air like two pendulums. Her head hung low, her eyes fixed on the floor, while she fidgeted with her fingers, rubbing her thumbs together. She looked hurt, and that, in turn, hurt him, but Izuku knew better than to let it show. He channeled all the positive emotions he could muster and prepared the happiest smile his face would produce. Eri, he called her, raising an arm to wave at her. His voice startled her, making her jump in her seat and turn to give him a shocked look. He sensed her hesitation, so he decided to walk closer to her, crouching down to be at eye level, and taking in on the details of her face. He'd missed her just as much as he'd missed everyone else, and looking at her safe and sound filled his heart with joy. He hadn't been able to save everyone, but Eri reminded him why he'd taken this path. What he fought for. Deku, she said, her eyes darting back and forth between her boots and his face. I'm so glad to see you're okay, he told her. I've missed you so much. You even look taller. A tiny smile spread on her face, but her expression morphed into concern just as fast. You look thinner, she pointed out. Izuku's smile faltered, but he soldiered through the unexpected observation. So I've been told, he admitted, leaving it at that. Getting into his eating habits for the past 2 months served no purpose. And my hair's a little fluffier. Should I get a haircut? What do you think? She studied his hair, and then raised her little hand, stopping it in midair as if asking for permission. He chuckled and leaned closer, letting her pet his green hair. Her fingers brushed it and examined a few locks, trying in vain to fix his eternally disheveled style. I like it, she concluded. Then I guess I'll keep it like this. She nodded, but soon she closed her eyes and took a deep breath, her whole body shaking for a second. Deku, Chi, thank you, she said at last. For coming back for me for fighting the bad people. Of course, Eri, I would never let anything happen to you, he said, and ever so carefully, placed a hand on one of her shoulders. She tensed for a second, and he almost removed it to avoid making her uncomfortable, but before he could do so she put a hand over his. I caused nothing but trouble, she said, and her lower lip began to tremble as her eyes filled with tears. The bad people were looking for me. Everyone had to fight because of me. If it wasn't for my quirk, then all those people wouldn't have died. Her free hand moved up to touch her horn, and looking at her sobbing like that, Izuku felt an icy claw clutching his heart. He tightened his grip on her shoulder and pulled the sleeve of his varsity jacket over his free hand, using it to wipe her tears away. Eri, it's not your fault. It never was. Your quirk is a great thing. It saved us, remember? It saved me, and you saved Lemillion. What the bad people did was their fault, not yours. That's why they're bad people, right? She nodded, but her expression and attitude didn't improve. He sighed, realizing that he knew exactly what she was going through. He knew those feelings all too well. I get how you feel. I feel the same way, he admitted, looking away for a second. I made a lot of people worry about me. People got hurt because of me, and some even. He trailed off, but the sudden, understanding look she gave him told him that she got what he meant. And it makes me feel bad. It makes me feel guilty. Sometimes I feel like I can't look them in the eye. That I don't deserve their love after what I caused. What do you do when you feel like that? He reflected on the question and pondered his answer for a bit until he had an epiphany and figured out a solution to a problem he'd been struggling with as well. Well, it doesn't do anyone any good if I just stay sad and mad at myself, does it? So I think of why they did what they did. And I know they did it because they wanted me to be a hero. So I think about that, and I tell myself I'm going to be the best hero I possibly can. That way I'm doing what they wanted me to do, and it's my way of repaying them. Her fingers curled on the back of his hand, and she sniffled as she did her best to control her emotions. He kept smiling, reassuring her that she could take her time, that he would be there for her. Why did you come back, then? She finally asked. Why did you do what you did? What do you want me to do? I can't be a hero. Her sweet tone and the way she genuinely asked those questions broke his heart. I came back because I heard my friends were in danger. I fought to protect you all, and maybe you can't be a hero just yet, but that's not what I want you to be. Gee, then what do you want me to be? His thumb brushed away a new tear that slid down her cheek. Happy, Eri. She stood aghast, and he could see in her flickering eyes how the gears turned in her head as his words began to sink in. Her crying became louder, stronger, uglier, and her grip on his hand tightened. I don't want you to be sad or to feel guilty. I want you to smile and be happy. Do you think you can do that? For me? She didn't reply right away. Instead, she launched forward, wrapped her arms around him, and buried her face on the crook of his neck. He let her cry her stress away, patting her back and holding her tight, trying to let her know that he wouldn't let go. Just like when he caught her as she jumped out of Chisaki's reach so long ago. It took her a while, but by the time she ended her hug, and before they walked into his room to talk until the adults came for Izuku, she gave him a genuine, heartfelt smile. Department of General Education. Follow me. I repeat. Department of General Education. Follow me. Ochako, along with many of her classmates, covered her ears and gave one strange look at Present Mike as he waved his arms in the air, trying to catch the attention of his students. The UA's student body had been summoned to the main hall of the hospital to get ready to head for the hotel where most of them would be staying until the school could rebuild the campus. The hospital, being a crucial, strategic piece of infrastructure that provided healthcare for the entire region, was ample enough to fit all the students. Unfortunately, fitting wasn't the same as being comfortable in, and Ochako now knew what it felt like to be inside a train during work hours in Tokyo. Toru and Kyoka sandwiched her, their shoulders pressed against each other's, and she could barely move her head to look around for a teacher calling for them. They were separating them all by their departments. 13 was in charge of the Department of Management. Ectoplasm had gathered the students from the Department of Support, and Present Mike had made it all too clear regarding who had to follow him. How are we even supposed to hear who's calling for us? Ochako asked, speaking loudly to be heard over all the students talking to each other. I'm on it. Or at least I'm trying, Kyoka said, tilting her earphone jacks in the air like small antennas. There's a lot of talking. And some of the things I'm hearing are awful. What do you mean? Toru asked. What kind of things? You know. Everyone that died. Ochako couldn't see Toru's face, but she figured it would be mirroring her own. She closed her eyes and sighed, shivering when a chill ran down her spine. Principal Nezu had visited them the day before, and among many things, he had shared the terrible news. 17 students had been killed during, or as a consequence of, the siege of UA. Most of the victims belonged to first-year classes outside of the hero course. Not many had died as a result of a confrontation with villains. The few that did were seniors from the hero course, trying to protect their junior classmates. As for the rest, most had been victims of collateral damage, crossfire, and the buildings collapsing on top of them. Not all the victims were students, however. Out of the many worried parents that rushed to the school as soon as they heard the news, 5 had been slain. And 3 pro-heroes had given up their lives. The writing hero, underrated, the siege hero, perilous, and the loud hero, automata. While not the most successful or popular heroes in the country, their names carried enough weight for their demise to bring much pain to the community. It was by far the greatest tragedy that UA or any other hero school had suffered in recent memory, and the mournful atmosphere weighed down on Ochako. She wondered if she could have done something more to save people. Logic and reason told her that she'd done everything she could. She'd protected many fellow students from C-tier villains. She'd gotten people out of the debris. She'd used that same debris to comet home run said villains. And then, she had risked her life to fight Toga. She hadn't been slacking or missing out on helping others. By all metrics and objective measures, she should have felt proud of what she'd accomplished. Then why did it feel that she'd come short? That it wasn't enough? Maybe, if she hadn't taken so long to beat Toga, she could have gone somewhere else to save more people. Had she not panicked at first until Iida took charge and led them into battle, had she acted quicker, had she been a better hero. She knew that stepping into the wandering ocean of the what-ifs wouldn't take her anywhere. It was a sea of uncharted waters that she could potentially keep navigating forever. and that would undoubtedly end up drowning her if she wasn't careful. She couldn't change the past, but she could work on the present to build a brighter future. She promised herself that she would learn the name of everyone that had lost their lives the previous day, and she'd train harder than ever to make up for her perceived failure. To make sure that, in the next crisis that hopefully never came, she'd rescue those that needed her. Wait, I hear Professor Izawa, Kyoka said, snapping Ochako out of her wandering thoughts. He's calling for us. Somewhere to their left, Mezzo had also heard their homeroom teacher calling for them, and the two led their classmates to one of the exits, where Izawa and Eri waited for them. Ochako's mood experienced a major boost of happiness when she noticed the expression the little girl had. Not half an hour ago, she'd seen her sitting all by herself in the hall outside of Izuku's room. She tried to talk to her, but Eri's body language told her just how uncomfortable she felt, so she didn't try to overstay her welcome and continued towards her room to pack up her hero costume. It hurt to see her looking so miserable, which made it all the more rewarding to see her shy smile as she looked at her feet, her scarlet eyes glowing with newfound hope and with no traces left of that lingering guilt that had plagued them. And Ochako, even without asking, could already tell how she'd gotten over that. Or, to be precise, who had most likely done his best to help her. It was a no-brainer that Izuku had talked with her. The signs were there. Her smile, the sweet calmness in her features, the kindness in her eyes. Those were the traces of Izuku's influence. At the very least, that's how she felt and looked whenever she talked with him. Perhaps it wasn't the same with others, but then again, the tight bond that Eri had with Mirio and Izuku was akin to what Ochako herself felt for him. Though more fraternal and platonic in Eri's case, naturally. She made sure to smile and wave her hand at Eri when the girl looked up to the people approaching her. Eri gently nodded her head before hiding half her body behind Eraserhead. All right, now that everyone's here, the teacher said after waiting for the last students to approach, let's organize how we're leaving. There are 3 buses for the hero course, so we'll make it simple enough. Classes 1A and 1B will leave on the bus marked with the number 26 on its side. Classes 2A and 2B will take bus number 17. And classes 3A and 3B will go on bus number 22. They're all waiting for you outside the hospital, and there's a lot of traffic out there, so make a line and step in as swiftly as possible. I don't want to waste more time than necessary. Class representatives and vice representatives, make sure your classmates don't step out of line. Yes, sir, the 6 representatives said at the same time. Very well. Classes 1A, 1B, 2B, 3A, and 3B, no one will stop by the press or make any comment. Is that clear? Yes, sir. Eraserhead, Professor. A red-haired girl from one of the first-year classes asked, raising her hand. I think you skipped class 2A. I did. Some of them will be answering questions. Ochako gulped, while many students around them began to murmur. The sound of their talking began to increase, but soon enough Aizawa's hair raised and a red eye stared at them for a second. All conversations stopped. Part of a hero's job is to be accountable with the public and bring a sense of clarity through honesty, he explained, his hair falling over his face once again. Transparency is a value that has been forgotten for a long time, and it's now our intention to bring it back as a substantial part of what we hope to teach you. That being said, dealing with the press can be a tough job and it's not always a pleasant experience. Class 2A was heavily featured in the press coverage, and it's now public knowledge that Midoriya was their classmate, so it's only natural that they will be sought after. They've also had lessons last year on how to give interviews, so it makes sense for them to put those skills to the test. Ochako could kinda see Aizawa's point, but she didn't have the best opinion on the press. She had ever put much thought into it, but the previous night had been a wake-up call for her. She'd seen some news channels and, while most of the coverage had been very respectful and informative, she sensed an almost obsessive focus on trying to learn more about Izuku and who he was. She knew it made sense for people to wonder about him, especially with how the HPSC intended to treat him, but part of her felt uncomfortable with how they talked about him. Wondering how powerful he was. What his connection with All Might and All for One was. The villains he defeated or captured. She understood the curiosity, but in her biased view, they were completely missing the point. Those aspects of him might be the reason why he was becoming a pro-hero, but they were most certainly not the reasons why he was a hero in the first place. She wished more people could learn that, but until Izuku gave the interview that the HPSC wanted him to give, there was nothing she could do about it. Iida, Todoroki, Uraraka, you'll be the ones answering questions to the press, Aizawa said, and Ochako's heart skipped a beat. Shoto tilted his head to the side, squinting his eyes and looking confused, while Tenya fixed his glasses and gave a firm nod. What? She asked, sounding more terrified than she intended. Tenya raised a hand at a perfect 90 angle and took a step forward. Professor, sir, may I ask the reasoning behind picking the three of us for this task? Aizawa pointed a finger at Shoto. Todoroki was recorded fighting All for One along with Midoriya, and given the reputation he built for himself at the sports festival and the weight of his name, his word will be important enough for the press to stop pestering the rest of you. Shoto nodded, but then a hand moved up to rub his chin. What word could that possibly be? She heard him mumble, and she would have worried about his lack of direction if Eraserhead hadn't then moved his finger to point at her. Uraraka was filmed with Midoriya at the end of the battle as well, so the media also knows her face. It's a good opportunity for her to give them her hero name. Besides, you both are close to Midoriya, so I know you won't say anything compromising. This brings me to the second reason why you are also going to be there. Iida, I trust you to be responsible enough to make sure none of you step out of line. I want you three to go there, introduce yourselves, and answer just a few questions. Don't overextend it and, without excuse, you will not answer anything that would violate Midoriya's privacy. Do you understand? Yes, sir. Worry not. I shall make sure that we answer the journalists with honesty but without giving away information that is not ours to divulge. Great. Now let's get going. Class representatives, lead the way. Not without some complications regarding the crowded space, the hero department began to exit the building. Ochako walked along with her classmates, although it felt more like she was being dragged by them. Her mind had too much to process for her to make sense of her surroundings. She could deal with some people asking questions. It didn't sound too bad she had done well enough in her lessons with Midnight and Mount Lady. How would those hold up to the real thing, however? Fighting real villains felt leagues beyond what her hero training classes were like. Having her life being put on the line couldn't be properly replicated in a controlled environment where failing only meant she had to work harder next time. Failing on the field meant she was dead. Gone for good. No more tries. She shook her head. She worried too much, sometimes. They weren't going to face villains, they were going to talk to the press. This was the opportunity of a lifetime. Pro heroes would be watching, agencies would be paying attention. She had the opportunity to put her name out there, to seize the moment and build the groundwork for her future. She needed to remember her goal, become a great hero to give her parents an easier life. She needed to focus. She took a big breath and put on a determined face, clenching her fists. With renewed motivation, she exited the hospital. Once outside, they were welcomed with the view of the radiant blue sky. The open space allowed them to walk without bumping into each other or feeling constricted. The feeling of freedom turned into but a fleeting relief, as they were soon made aware of the temporary fences to their left that kept the reporters at bay. Cameras, flashes, microphones, and 1,000 arms seemed to come out of the homogeneous mass that waited for them. Hyoka winced at all the yelling, and the different classes aligned behind their respective class representatives. Class 2A was no exception, and Ochako took her place right between Tenya and Shoto. Yaoyorozu, I entrust you to take our class to our designated bus while Todoroki, Uraraka, and myself speak with the press. Of course, Iida, I wish you three the best of luck. Much obliged. Very well then, Class 2A, let's get moving. The 20 students walked towards the sidewalk. Like Yuga and Mina, some seemed to enjoy the attention, walking with puffed chests and raised chins, while others like Fumikage and Mezzo looked quite uncomfortable by the flashes and all the eyes set on them. The reporters soon realized what class they were from, and chaos ensued. They hadn't made it even halfway to the bus before the reporters began to lose their collective minds, thinking they would leave without talking to them. The questions mashed up together into a cacophony. Tenya looked back at Ochako and Shoto, and when they nodded, the three drifted away from the path their classmates were taking, moving towards the reporters. Excuse me, please, may I have your attention for a moment? Tenya said, waving his arms around like an uncoordinated Macarena dance. Microphones flew in his direction and the camera flashes dazzled him, but he remained stoic as he spoke. We are here to represent Class 2A of the Department of Heroes of UA High School. We understand you have many questions, and it is our predisposition to answer them to the best of our ability. However, our time is limited, as we have previous compromises and places to attend. So let's try to figure this out in a formally organized mob. The moment the reporters realized they wouldn't be able to ask many questions, they decided to fire them all at the same time. Ochako flinched, and could only make out but a few of the things they were asked in a second. What's your name? Could you explain your quirks? What is your hero name? Shoto. Was Deku close to you? What can you tell us about Deku? Do you know the link between Deku and All for One? Did All Might prepare you all to fight All for One, or was Deku the chosen one? What did you feel when Deku arrived at UA to defeat All for One? How many quirks does Deku have? Is his hair natural green or does he dye it? Ochako felt overwhelmed, but a sense of protectiveness and caring took over her, mixed in with a pinch of anger and annoyance. She suppressed a scowl and cleared her throat, amazed at the speed that all the mics and cameras turned to look at her. I get that you want to know more about Deku, she began, her initial conviction and courage fading under so many scrutinizing glances. But, but he's going to give an interview soon, and we don't want to say anything he's not comfortable sharing. Please. I know he's trending everywhere and everyone's talking about him, but he's still a person, right? And he needs space. Could you, maybe ask us about ourselves and leave the personal questions about Deku too? Well, Deku. They paid attention to her every word, staying respectfully silent until the very end of her statement, nodding their heads vigorously to what she said. The instant she finished, however, a reporter moved her mic to ask a question. That's very noble of you. An exemplary behavior expected from heroes in training from such a noteworthy institution. She complimented them, making Ochako smile, Shoto nod, and Tenya puff his chest out. I imagine you must be close to Deku to want to protect his privacy with such uprightness. She left it at that, pointing the mic back at Ochako. Well, yeah, he's our best friend. She explained, her eyes looking up to the sky for a second as she pictured Izuku's smiling face. Or, well, my best friend, I guess, I don't want to speak for them. But we're all really close, and we all appreciate Deck. Wait a minute. As the hamster wheel kept turning inside her head and she realized she'd been bamboozled into talking about Izuku, another reporter quickly diverted the attention towards Iida. Could you please introduce yourself to the audience at home? Why, yes, of course. My name is Tenya Iida. I am the elected representative of Class 2A, and the hero in training Ingenium, he explained with serenity. Ingenium, are you related to the former pro hero? Some other reporter asked. Yes, I am his younger brother, and he's asked me to carry on the mantle of the turbo hero, Ingenium once I graduate from UA. Coming from a family with a respected lineage of pro heroes, and having most likely grown up hearing their stories about fighting crime, what does it feel to find yourself at the epicenter of such a historical event? Iida took a moment to consider the question, his hands almost comically imitating the pose of the thinker, furrowed brow included, until he hummed to himself, nodded, and put his robot arms back on line to gesture as he spoke. To be perfectly frank, I believe we are all still recovering from the shock and trying to make sense of what happened. I don't think any of us are truly aware of yesterday's event's scale and importance. We will probably understand it in time, but for now, we are just glad the League of Villains has been defeated. We are mourning the lives that were tragically lost, and we are looking forward to helping build a brighter future. Ochako stared at the serene face of her friend, surprised and impressed by his serious tone and the eloquence of his words. She experienced something similar to what usually happened to her every couple of weeks. One day she'd look at herself in the mirror and she'd realize how long her hair got, falling past her shoulders and with her bangs starting to obstruct her vision. She would stop for a second and think to herself, oh, wow, I should probably cut my hair. She would then go to Sue or Toru, who would give her a free haircut as they talked about life, and as they did that, she'd wonder why hadn't she noticed earlier how long her hair got. The answer lies in the gradualness of the changes. Small changes that made it hard to notice the progression until one day the difference was evident and unmistakable. It applied to her hair, and it applied to how she suddenly noticed that her friend Iida looked and talked like a real hero. His posture, his attitude, his language, his message to society. He didn't sound like a high school student. Hearing him, she felt in the presence of a hero. A hero that had been built gradually, one step at a time. Getting into UA. The attack at USJ. What happened with his brother and Stain? All the internships and hero work they'd done. Their work at Naboo Island. The war. The last couple of months. The siege of UA. Stepping stones that had forced Tenya to mature at an impossibly fast rate, getting him there. And, for a moment, Ochako wondered if the same could be said about herself. She couldn't dwell upon those thoughts for long, as the reporters decided that Tenya's statements were good enough for now, and they turned their attention towards Shoto. Shoto Todoroki. First off, I'm truly sorry about what happened to your father, a reporter said, and while Shoto's expression remained unaltered, Ochako noticed an almost imperceptible change in his eyes, hinting at a pain he'd been trying to hide from others. Does the defeat of All for One bring any sense of closure or justice to you? Shoto looked away for a second, thinking in silence. My father was aware of the danger and risks of being a pro-hero, he finally said. He dedicated his life to making the world a better place for us to live in. He died to give others the chance to stop All for One. Defeating him didn't bring my father back. He took a breath and sighed. But it felt good. 1,000 lights flashed at him, but he didn't flinch or blink. Ochako smiled sympathetically at her friend, reaching over with a hand to rub his left arm. Will you be taking over the Endeavor Agency? I can't. I beg your pardon. I can't take the leadership of my father's hero agency. Why not? Because I'm still in high school. And what about after you graduate? What about it? The reporter squinted his eyes, trying to figure out if he was being played, but Shoto's confused face and innocent tone were genuine. Will you be taking over the Endeavor Agency? I'm not sure, he answered, nonchalantly scratching his right cheek with a finger. My father took his agency very seriously, and he wrote down instructions on how it should continue if he ever died on duty. Did he envision you as his successor as the tentpole hero and CEO of the agency? I don't know. You haven't run through your father's notes on how to continue his legacy. Shoto tilted his head and looked at the reporter like that was the stupidest thing he'd ever heard. Why would I run through them? My shoes have ice grips, they would destroy all the documents. The flashes stopped and the reporters slowly turned their heads to look at each other. Silence took over for 8 solid seconds, and then all the cameras unanimously decided to turn towards an unexpected Ochako. Could you also introduce yourself to the public? People have been meaning to know more about the hero that stood with Deku during the aftermath of the battle. Another reporter asked her, snapping her out of her confusion. Me, she muttered, once again feeling small and insignificant while facing the press and knowing that there were real people out there listening to her on live TV. She looked to the side at Shoto, who stared at her with curious eyes, and then at Tenya, who tried to give her a discreet thumbs up by slowly raising them to his chin, misunderstanding the concept of subtlety. Uh, yeah, I'm Ochako Uraraka, and my hero's name is Uravati. I study at UA, obviously. Oh, and I also work at Yukyu's agency. Were you part of the Shi Hasaikai raid last year, then? Ochako took a second to answer. Were they trying to get her to talk about Deku again? I was, yes, she cautiously replied, looking at how a few reporters took notes or said something through their ear communicators, presumably to their production team. Could you elaborate on your quirk? She sighed in relief and smiled at the reporter. Yeah, no problem. My quirk is called zero gravity. I can make anything weightless after I touch them with my fingers, she explained, raising her hands and waving her fingers to show the small pads at their tips. I have a weight limit, but I've been pushing that limit further and further. It's a great quirk to disable villains. I can have them float aimlessly in the air. I can also use it to turn heavy objects into weapons, and it's great for rescue missions. Helping with collapsing buildings, natural disasters, and stuff. Oh, and it's also great for construction work, too, which is my family's business back in Mie Prefecture. She hoped her parents were watching her right then. She still didn't have her phone with her, so she couldn't text them to turn on the TV, but she wanted to believe that some other family members or friends would record it and send it to her parents. What's it like for a young hero in training to see their school being attacked by villains? The mics and cameras kept pointing at her, so she stopped to consider her answer. Listening to Tenya made her want to speak like a hero as well, to give society and the people at home a message of hope and optimism. She wanted to smile and tell everyone that it was okay, that she had been trained to respond to emergencies and act under pressure. That after a tough battle they'd stood victorious, and that it was time to look at the future and focus on the reconstruction ahead. She so wanted to say those things. But she knew better than to lie. She'd seen what lying did to people, to society even. No good thing could sprout from a foundation based on dishonesty, and thus, she bit her lip and closed her eyes before responding with her truth. It's terrifying, she admitted, closing her hands over her chest. The teachers told us to evacuate, to help the students from other departments escape. And it all sounds good until there's an explosion and the entire campus is on fire. And you start hearing the screams, and seeing the blood, and the smoke gets to you, and you realize that you couldn't save everyone. I was really scared. She shivered, but then opened her eyes and shared a look with her two friends, smiling at them through the scary memories. It's scary, but then you see someone that needs help, and it's like your legs move on their own. And at that point, you realize that it doesn't matter if you're scared or not, you know you have to act and do your best. And I could do my best 'cause I had my friends to inspire me. Todoroki said he could do more good fighting than running away, and he ran to the fight right away. And Iida reminded us that heroes don't hesitate, that it was the time to prove ourselves. All my friends inspired me to give my best. Uraraka was an inspiration for us as well, Tenya added, looking at his friend with a proud smile, raising a closed fist in the air. She might have felt scared like the rest of us did, but she kept her guard up and acted quickly on her feet to save others. Her determination and fighting spirit spread to me, and that's how I got the courage to fight myself. How did you feel when you saw Deku showing up to join the fight? The same female reporter that had tricked Ochako earlier asked. She looked at Shoto and Tenya. They silently pondered whether it was okay for them to respond to that. Aizawa had asked them to avoid talking about Deku, but the question aimed at their feelings. The intentionality behind it probably looked for indirect information about Deku, but there didn't seem to be anything particularly wrong with the question. I can only speak for myself, but the timely arrival of Mido, of Deku, I should say, gave me a second wind, Tenya answered. He appeared right when everything seemed lost from my perspective, but looking at my old friend take down Gigantomachia and tell us to not give up inspired me to look past the pain and to go beyond. When I saw him, I felt pain, Shoto responded, touching his stomach. All for one had just stabbed me. I had to cauterize my wound. It was very painful. Ochako hit his ribs with her elbow, and although he seemed confused as to why his friend would try to hurt him in public, the way she raised her eyebrows at him seemed to light a bulb inside his head. I was also happy to see him after so long. I was ready to die fighting, but when he showed up, I thought that maybe we could win after all. The focus then shifted to Ochako, who remained with her policy of speaking with nothing but the truth. I felt a lot of things at the same time, she admitted, trying to make sure that her cheeks wouldn't blush. Part of me was super afraid, 'cause I knew that for better or worse, it would be his last fight against All for One. I was super happy too. I hadn't seen him for such a long time. I was fighting a dangerous villain, and for a second I thought I would die. She didn't notice how her right hand rubbed the white scar she'd hidden from Izuku, right where Toga's knife had pierced her hand. But then I saw him and I don't know. I just thought back to everything we'd been through. Everything he'd been through, too. And I felt that I needed to be there for him, and that made me fight harder. He's selfless to a fault, right? He's always looking after others, and I wanted to be the one looking after him. Ochako only realized what she'd said when the flashes went off, blinding her and forcing her to think back to her words. She had probably said more than necessary, and she'd fallen back into talking about Deku. She blushed and looked away from the flashes. The reporters began to shoot more questions her way, all of them wondering about Deku, but thankfully for her, Tenya intervened. "We are truly sorry, but I believe we should be going back with our class," he said, waving his arms to catch the attention of the reporters. The media began to act like a mindless mob once again, all of them almost violently asking questions at the same time, trying to have one final question. Tenya apologized but insisted they had to leave and was about to direct his friends back to the bus when one question ringed in their heads above the rest. What keeps you motivated to be heroes given the current state of the hero society and the negative image that most pros have right now? The three of them stopped, having heard the question, and turned to look at the reporter that asked it. They stayed in silence for a couple of seconds before returning next to the security fences and the microphones. "The League of Villains made people feel unsafe," Shoto said. "I want to reverse that. I want everyone to feel safe again. While it is true that the trust in heroes has faltered as the result of bad decisions and communication mistakes, my brother taught me that there's no true meaningful purpose in life that comes without a burden. And that the heavier the burden, the nobler and more meaningful our contribution to society becomes. And I am willing to carry the weight of past mistakes, and fight against it to remind people why heroes are important." Once again, Ochako found herself in possession of the final answer, and she took a second to reflect on it. Why did she want to be a hero? Well, she wanted to give her parents an easier life. She wanted them to be happy and not worry about all their bills and eviction notices and empty fridges that took away from their happiness during her childhood. That's what she wanted the most in the world. Or at least that's what she'd always wanted. During the past couple of months, however, specifically since April, right when her second year was about to start, she'd found herself wondering what kept her going. What motivated her to be a hero? What it meant for her to be a hero? And she'd come to 1,000 different answers. Some more heroic, some more cynical, some even borderline nihilistic. She'd spent many sleepless nights trying to figure out if she was doing the right thing. But every time she thought she'd hit a new low, every time she'd read the news and hear about a mysterious figure saving people, she'd find her answer. An almost self-evident answer, but that had somehow escaped her for the longest time. She wanted to help her parents, yes, but money wasn't the real motivation. Something else was. Something much deeper and meaningful, greater than just her parents. I just want to make people smile, she replied, having a very special smile in her mind as she spoke, one that meant a lot to her and that she'd missed seeing. I want to be there to save people, even people that don't want or don't know that they need to be saved, and make them smile again. Many follow up questions ensued, but Tenya didn't hesitate to lead his classmates away from the press and towards their bus. On their way there, Ochako kept dwelling upon her final answer. She truly wanted to make people smile, and her loved ones played a major role in that. She knew it would take a while to fulfill her goal of properly helping her parents with their financial situation, but there were other people she could help in the meantime. Other loved ones, other stubborn, heroic, green haired fools that looked like they needed more smiles in their lives. She could start there, and see where it got her. See if being a hero felt as good as she hoped. Did I do better than last time? Shoto asked as they approached the bus. I believe you did, Todoroki. Your performance was better than last time, for sure, Tenya said, pitying his friend and saving him the embarrassment. Shoto missed out on the White Lion sighed in relief. I see. Do you think they appreciated my word? I'm sure they appreciate it. You gave them a lot to talk about, Ochako mentioned, sharing a worried glance with Tenya. Very well. Teacher will be pleased. He nodded, before squinting his eyes. Although I'm still not sure which word they were specifically waiting for. It was probably cauterize. Izuku sat on his bed, knees pressed against his chest, eyes closed, trying to suppress the numbness in his heart. Eri and Eraserhead had left a few minutes earlier, with the young girl getting over most of her fears and insecurities. At the very least, she had seemingly cried out her frustrations, and after being reassured that Izuku still cared for her the same as always, she managed to calm down and have a nice talk with him. He'd mostly asked about what she'd been up to in the past few weeks, which led to banal conversations as she happily told him about her progress with writing, drawing, and reading. She promised him that she'd draw him something, and that warmed up his heart. Sooner than he would have wished, however, Aizawa and Eri were told by Death Arms that they had to leave. The young girl made him promise that he would come back to school soon, and after giving her his word, they bid goodbye and left him with the room to himself. Death Arms told him that Agent Mero would arrive shortly, and Izuku thanked the pro-hero. With but a few minutes to spare, he sat on the bed and looked at his surroundings. Everything seemed clean, almost too clean for his taste, from the pristine blankets to the immaculate walls and the spotless tiles, all shining under the artificial LED lights. Such an unblemished place disturbed him in a way he couldn't explain. After reluctantly getting used to the dirty, rough, unforgiving life on the streets, things as simple as a clean, comfortable bed sounded like a luxury to him. He'd been forced to live in almost inhuman conditions as he stayed under all for one's radar. He had always thought of himself as someone with modest expectations. He didn't need a mansion or a great car to feel like he had a good life. He had a much lower bar, focused more on the people around him and his passions rather than material possessions. Even then, life on the street had been tough for him. The cold nights, not being able to shower, the rationed meals. Up to the previous night, he hadn't eaten a proper meal since. He shivered, his blood seemingly dropping in temperature within a second. Endeavor, Genist, and Hawks offered him food and shelter time and time again, but he rejected it each time. He needed to be alone. He couldn't risk anyone else getting hurt because of him. The pro-heroes eventually realized his stubbornness and stopped trying to convince him. Except for All Might, he never gave up on Izuku. He kept communicating to him, staying in contact, keeping him sane. And he never stopped bringing him homemade bento boxes. Not even after Izuku asked him to stay away from him, to stay safe. And where had that gotten them? Where was All Might now? He clenched his fists so hard he cracked one of his knuckles, and a feeling of despair and hopelessness took over his body. He tried to take in deep breaths, but the feeling of his chest going numb and the shaking of his arms didn't go away. His eyes began to itch and he felt a sudden urge to cry, one he was quick to control and bury. Not now, not there. He was expecting visitors. He couldn't break down now. The minutes stretched, each one feeling much longer than the previous one, and while he wouldn't say he got necessarily better, he managed to stop himself from getting worse. That, lately, counted as a win. Eventually, however, someone knocked on his door, and after tricking his face into looking presentable, he walked there to open it. He expected to see Agent Mara from the Hero Public Safety Commission, and indeed there he stood, but he wasn't alone. Principal Nezu, Izuku asked, surprised to see the furry hero. The one and only, he said, raising a paw with his never-changing smile. Behind Mara, Izuku saw his mom carrying several folders filled to the brim with pages, and she looked exhausted. And next to her, he noticed Detective Tsukauchi, All Might's former friend. Naomasa gave him a slight nod and a smile. Good afternoon, Midoriya, Mara said, the eye bags under his eyes looking worse by the day. May we come in? Sure. He stepped aside and let Mara walk into the room, followed by the rest of the adults. When his mom walked past him, he helped her by grabbing the folders. What are these? I had to sign a lot of papers, she said with a tired tone. I apologize, I know it's a lot, said Mara, but we needed to sort these things out before continuing. Trust me, no one hates bureaucracy more than me. It's fine, sir. I'll admit, it was slightly exciting signing all these documents. Inko looked at the folder her son was carrying with a dreamy look. Besides, it's all for Izuku, so I'm happy for him. Hum. Well, I'm glad we could figure out everything regarding your son's legal situation and his new bank accounts. Wait, what? Izuku asked, looking at the papers he was holding. But I'm sure you'll catch him up with everything soon. Oh, and Midoriya, we contacted Mr. Tokuda and he has agreed to host the interview. He'll get in touch with your mother to arrange the details, but we've settled on Sunday at 9 p.m., right after the public act where you'll get your Pro Hero license. You're free to ask specific questions or topics that you don't want to discuss. Sunday. He trailed off, looking to the side and biting his lip, deep in thought. Inko put a hand on his shoulder and smiled at him. Today's Tuesday. Oh, right. Thank you, he said, slightly embarrassed. Every day had felt the same for so long, and it was hard to keep track of something as trivial as time or what day of the week he was on. Very well, Midoriya, Mrs. Midoriya, if you don't mind, please take a seat. Izuku turned to see that Mara had arranged the chairs in the room so he and Detective Tsukauchi were facing Nezu and two empty chairs. He placed the folders on his bed and took his place with the rest of the adults. May I ask what's going on? You just did, Nezu pointed out, his 2 feet dangling over the edge of his chair. We managed to figure out everything related to the immediate future and the legal ramification of you becoming a pro-hero, your pardon, and other circumstances. Your mom has been put up to date on everything, and the Hero Public Safety Commission will provide legal advisors to help with every step of the way. Right, so what's left? Well, this isn't an issue regarding the Hero Public Safety Commission directly, but Mr. Sukauchi has asked me to be here as a representative of the institution for what he has to share. And I would rather be here than talking with the press, so yeah. But what is this, sir? Izuku asked, getting slightly frustrated with how Mara seemed to be beating around the bush without saying why the detective and Nezu were there with him. Was it regarding his actions as a vigilante? Were the police going to ask UA to take measures with him? He knew better than to still think he was in trouble, but maybe there were some clauses to his pardon he needed to take into account. Mara looked at Naomasa, who glanced at a couple of papers he held before clearing his throat. Well, Deku, we've been waiting for you to settle down so we could get you, Principal Nezu, and someone from the Hero Public Safety Commission in the same room. You see, he said, flicking a finger at the corner of the pages, you're all beneficiaries of All Might's estate, and we require all parties involved to read his last will and testament. If Izuku's heart kept skipping beats like it had been doing in the past 48 hours, he would have to check in with a cardiologist to get his arrhythmia treated. The numb sensation on his chest doubled down, and a lead ball dropped inside his stomach. All Might's will? He asked, dumbfounded. Yes, he updated it shortly before, you know. And he let me know in advance that he wanted me to be the executor of his last will. I've read the document already, but we waited for you to finish your business before sharing it with Principal Nezu and the HPSC. Perfectly reasonable, the high-spec animal said, nodding his head. And you're one of the beneficiaries, yes. I know this might be too sudden or too much, so if you don't feel ready, we can reschedule this for a different time. He was most certainly not ready. Not ready at all, even though a week or so had passed since All Might and Endeavor's deaths at the hands of All for One. Izuku hadn't truly processed them. The only thing he did was wrecking that one abandoned warehouse he hid in, letting Blackwhip wreak havoc and obliterate everything around him. That hardly counted as proper management of his emotions, and he didn't think he could ever get over it or get ready to face the true consequences of his actions. He didn't feel ready to read All Might's will. That would just mean, it would mean he was gone for good. His belongings wouldn't be his anymore. They would belong to someone else, just like how One for All now belonged to Izuku and only him. There was no other user alive. All Might would then become a memory for good. He didn't want to take that step. He didn't want to live in a world where he was the heir of his mentor. He didn't want to accept that. He didn't. The warm shadow of a hand touched his shoulder, and he looked to his upper left. Don't be afraid, young Midoriya, the smoke-like vestige of All Might told him, his bright smile bigger than ever. I am here with you. Will always be with you, until the end of the road, but you can't keep running ahead if you're always looking back. He didn't say anything, but he knew the part of All Might that lived inside him could read his feelings. Indeed, a second later, the former number one hero patted his back and moved his hand to ruffle his hair. Don't worry, I'll stay with you. We'll get through this together. Somewhat reassured by the presence of his mentor, Izuku gulped and closed his eyes for a second. His fists clenched on his knees, wrinkling his pants, and he gave a small nod to himself. It's fine, sir. We can do this now. Naomasa nodded, cleared his throat, and then proceeded to begin reading the documents. I, Toshinori Yagi, resident of the city of Musafatu, Shizuoka Prefecture, Japan, being of sound mind, not acting under duress or undue influence, and fully understanding the nature and extent of all my property and this disposition thereof, do hereby make, publish, and declare this document to be my last will and testament, and hereby revoke any and all other wills and codicils heretofore made by me. The testament went on to talk about taxes and expenses and how Detective Naomasa Tsukauchi had been appointed as the executor of the will. All the while, Izuku felt his throat going dry, cold sweat falling down his back and armpits, and his feet impatiently tapping the floor. Inko put a hand over his, and the vestige of All Might kept a firm grip on his shoulder, squeezing tightly every once in a while, even though he could only feel a soft, warm sensation. Section 3. Disposition of property. The detective read out loud, looking at all the parties involved, and the ghost hand on Izuku's shoulder felt like it was painlessly burning on his shoulder. I devise and bequeath my property, both real and personal and wherever situated, as follows. To the Hero Public Safety Commission, with its main building located in Tokyo, Japan, as my legislators and employers for almost 4 decades, I leave the collection of my original costumes, the mementos of my past battles, and all my material belongings that are still kept in the building of my agency. They may do with them as they please, although it is my hope that they would exhibit them at a public museum or, should they decide to sell them, to donate that money to a charity of their choosing to help those in need of protection. Mara nodded and let out a huge sigh, rubbing his long, skeletal fingers over his eyelids. I guess I shall respect his wishes by getting into contact with the National Museum of Heroics. I hate talking to those guys. Scholars are so hard to deal with. To the UA High School, currently located on Musafatu, Shizuoka Prefecture, as the place where I learned how to be a hero and my last private employer. I leave my financial assets and the All Might's brand right of publicity, including but not limited to ownership and control of my commercial brand, my hero name and likeness, and the right to collect residuals from the sale of products that utilize my brand. I would like to extend to Principal Nezu, or whoever may be in charge of the school, my wish to have them use that money to create and sustain a scholarship to help to scout promising students that may otherwise not consider or would be unable to take the entrance exam. Young students that may not think their quirks or lack thereof would make them eligible given the reputation of UA. After meeting my successor, I realized that our biggest hopes may lie in those that we as a society are often too blind to see. Ah, what a wonderful idea, Nezu mentioned. UA will gladly carry on his last will, and I shall get in contact with the school board soon to figure out the logistics. I believe we could create this scholarship and make it effective within this semester to scout possible candidates for next year's entrance exams. It could also act the same way as the recommendation program. The All Might Scholarship. Toshinori managed to find a way to still help those in need even after he's gone. Truly, the spirit of a real hero. Izuku smiled. Yes, indeed, that sounded so much like All Might. To give all his money just to help kids get into UA and possibly become heroes. His chest swelled with pride and happiness, especially after he caught the way he'd phrased people not believing in their quirks, or lack thereof. Of course, young Midoriya. You and I know that there's much more to a hero than what they're born with. We do, he thought to himself and the vestiges. Lastly, to Izuku Midoriya, Naomasa read, and time itself seemed to stop for a second as Izuku leaned forward on his chair. From Musafatu, Shizuoka Prefecture, as my protege, my successor. He looked up from the page to meet Izuku's eyes, and the teenager felt the hairs on his neck standing up with a chill. Naomasa waited a second before gulping and looking down once again, and when he resumed his reading, his soft tone delivered the words with just the slightest hesitation. And the son I never had. He had enough empathy to pause after delivering the coup de grace to Izuku's brittle emotional state, and along with the other adults in the room, he stared with sympathy at the boy as he took in the words he'd just listened to. Izuku, who had been leaning forward with his hands on his knees, leaned back and recoiled from the impact. At first, he felt nothing but outright shock, believing that he may have misheard or misunderstood what the detective said. But he knew he hadn't. He knew All Might had written those words, and most importantly, he knew that he meant it. He let out a shaky breath and rushed to move a closed fist to his mouth, pressing it until he was biting the side of his finger, trying to stop his muscles from locking up and his eyes from bursting into tears. All his mental efforts were put into stopping himself from breaking down, but soon enough he had to deviate resources to process All Might's words, and the moment he did, he couldn't hide a howl and the first heavy tears to fall on the back of his hand. Izuku didn't hate his dad. He didn't feel particularly attached to him either. He was grateful to the man for bringing him to life and to keep sending money to him and Inko, even though they were no longer legally married. He moved on with his life, made enough to provide for them, and didn't stay in touch. It had never bothered him. His mom was all he'd ever need to grow up healthy and happy. And then he met All Might, the person he admired the most. His idol, a man that embodied everything Izuku loved, a man that believed in him, a man that saw beyond his quirklessness, a man that told him he could reach his dream, and that looked after him. They would train together, but they would also sit at the edge of the water and watch the sunset, with All Might wanting to know more about him. He would ask about his day, his favorite movies. He would recommend books to read. Once he found out Izuku used to spend many afternoons inside his house with nothing but books to entertain himself. Then he'd gotten into UA, and even though their time spent together became less and less, he still called him to his office for lunch quite often, supervising his studies and his growth as a hero and a person. He'd never told him, but like Shoto had pointed out earlier, All Might had become Izuku's surrogate father. What he felt for him had evolved from mere admiration to love, parental love. He could feel All Might's love for him as well, but they had never said it out loud. And to think that he had missed out on that opportunity. To think that he had never told him how he truly felt. His mom gave him a side hug and rested her head on his shoulder, while the other hand, the one he could feel but that wasn't physically there, patted his back. Naomasa gave him a minute of respectful silence.